Welcome to the North Idaho College March 25th trustee meeting. If you would all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Normally I ask Trustee Howard to read the mission statement, and he is delayed at the moment, so I will do that. North Idaho College meets the diverse educational needs of students, employers, and the Northern Idaho communities it serves through a commitment to student success, educational excellence, community engagement, and lifelong learning. We think it's important that we open every meeting understanding our mission. All right, board, the first thing that brings us to is our introduction of guests. I do see we have former trustee Mick Armand in the audience with us tonight, and we have a big audience, so that's great. That takes us to the review of the minutes. Board, any questions or suggestions on the minutes? Hearing none, we will consider the minutes approved. And I do not see that anyone has signed up for public comment. Is that correct? Okay. So that takes us right to celebrating success, our English department. Oh, I love the English department. Efforts in remediation, reform, and retention, Erin Davis and Molly Mashad.
Good evening, Madam Chair, trustees, President Dunlap, members of President's Cabinet, and guests. We are really happy and excited to be sharing with you the good things that have been going on in the composition program in the English department over the past couple of years. We have been responding to the need to reform our remediation and our composition courses. That has been a nationwide conversation that's been going on. Through channels like Complete College Idaho, we've been responding to the state's call to look at these things, but most importantly, we've been responding to the needs of our own students. And we have been looking at ways we can reform our remedial composition course program to increase retention and bolster student success and kind of help students who are struggling overcome some of the hurdles that they might encounter to make them successful in our composition programs. We've also been collaborating with first-year college writing programs statewide. And so last summer, Molly, Kim Johnson, and I were down in Boise collaborating with composition instructors and program directors from every single college and university in Idaho for talking about best practices and how to create what we refer to as 101 plus courses. And so they are 1-credit courses that are attached to certain sections of English 101. So for example, I have a 101 section with a 101 plus course attached to it this semester. And I have 8 students in that 101 course who are also enrolled in that 1-credit 101 plus support class. And so what we do is I meet with those students once a week for an hour after class, giving them extra support. And so what we've been doing is identifying students who might normally have placed in English 099 that we could be successful in English 101 with a little bit of extra support, and working with them in these 101 plus courses for, is it 2 years now?
2.5 years.
2.5 years, okay.
Yeah. So what we've done is we looked at how we were placing our students. We determined that reading score placement determines success better than the writing score element of the compass. We were able to then shift some of the students that would have formerly placed into 099 into the 101 with the 114 support course. In doing this, next slide, you can see that we've changed our numbers significantly. From fall 13, we had 6 045 courses. Fall 14, we have 0, and we have now moved those students to ABE. Since that time, from 099, we've gone from 15 sections. This year, we've had 10 sections. We are the one school in the state that still has an 099 course. primarily to meet the needs of our professional technical students who don't need to advance beyond a 3-credit course. And then we have increased the number of 101 courses that we offer. As you can see, we're up to 30 courses. 19 of our 101 courses are the 101 plus designations. We placed 110 students into English 101 114C. We have significantly, as I mentioned, reduced the number of the 099 sections and eliminated all of the English 045 sections. A third to a half are going into ABE. The rest of those are going to 099, and that number fluctuates from semester to semester based on those test scores. At the present time, we have 13 sections of 101 114C, and the most significant and important part of this presentation is that we have a 99% retention rate after week 11. 76% of those students have successfully completed English 101 with a C or better, and that's an 8% increase from before we had implemented this. In total, those students have saved $20,664. That's 246 students per student in tuition costs. Removing the remediation hurdles, without a doubt, increases our success rate and our retention rate. So that's something we're very proud of.
And that savings in tuition cost is because we have students who would have normally taken at least 2 semesters, right, to take English 099 and then English 101. And now they're doing English 101 in 1 semester with just 1 additional credit. And so that's 2 credits, of English 099 that they are not having to pay for. And so we're having great academic success. We're saving students in tuition dollars. We've streamlined the process, but most of all, we're really proud about what's happening in those 101 plus courses. So I just wanted to kind of explain to you what we do in that course. And so students meet with us once a week for an hour. Most of the time, those 101 plus courses happen right after our English 101 course. There's no additional books for students to buy because we're just offering them extra support in that 101 course. So of course we give them extra support in tackling the reading material that we work with, because most of the writing that you do in college, you write about what you read about. We offer them help and extra support and extra conferencing, helping them with their rough drafts while they're in the process of writing. But we also tackle what we call non-cognitive skills and sometimes non-cognitive obstacles to success. And so we will talk with them, hey, let's plan out the next few weeks. Let's look at when your drafts are due, when this paper is due. What do you need to do in order to manage your time successfully? Sometimes we have them engage in reflective writing where they kind of talk about what's stressing you out about this paper. Let's write about this for a few minutes and then talk about it as a group. A lot of times Molly or I will walk into our 101 plus class and say, what's going on? How are you feeling after class today? What can I help you with? And so it's very student driven, helping them deal with, yes, the reading and writing process, but also all of the other factors that often go into student success, especially struggling students. So whether that's other stresses on their time, learning other places on campus that can help them, the Writing Center, the College Skills Center. I know Molly and I both take them on a tour at the beginning of the semester of all the great resources on campus that they can find for support. So that's what we're doing in our 101 plus courses, and it seems to be working really well. And often those students become leaders in our English 101 courses. So they might be students who were really intimidated by English 101 at the beginning of the semester. They're soon in there working in small groups with their 101 peers, and they're actually helping them. And so it's been working really well. Are there any questions?
Fantastic. Board, any comments or questions? Yes, Ms.
Just
Meyer.
one on the jargon. What's non-cognitive?
So non-cognitive is that is jargon, yes. So those are the skills that are not reading or writing. They're not academic skills, but they are, and I don't know why they call them non-cognitive, because we still have to
cognitive is-
think, right?
Right,
But they're all kind of looking at all of the other life management skills that go into succeeding, not just in English 101, but in college in general. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I have to tell you my own personal experience here. I loved my English courses. I got to give a shout out to Dan Urlacher, my English instructor. I remember the frustration. As I was running for the board many years ago, I kind of tried to pick a few people's brains about some of the frustration. And it was the remediation piece with students coming to your classes ill-prepared. They couldn't even pick up where the rest of the class was to even move forward. And it's amazing all these years later to see all that the English division is doing to address that issue. I wish those resources would have been there. I mean, I wasn't struggling to that level, but just even that kind of a resource is really amazing. I just think it's incredible what you've done, and our hats are off to you. Thank you. Yes, Trustee Meyer.
Just following up, on your streamlining remediation sheet, here we'll try my cognitive math skills. You talked about eliminating all the English 45 sections. Then we have 1/3 to 1/2 of the students placed into 99, and 1/3 placed into ABE, ABE being Adult Basic Education, which we provide on this campus as well. So you're sort of allocating out the folks in the skill level they have. And so really the question one is, I want to be sure that we haven't streamlined it so much that people still get lost in the system because they aren't tuned up enough to be successful in the 101, even though there's a plus, when the gap might be really large.
Well, I think that we had English 045
Yep.
as a college course that student had to pay for. We still have English 045, it's now just in ABE. And so the good news is those students who are testing as low as English 045 no longer have to pay or take out student loans to take that course. So it's still a course that is there for them. It's just, it's not part of the English department's remediation course. And that was a concern, Trustee Meyer, that we very much had. We didn't want to just, in the name of streamlining, just be kind of letting a bunch of students go by the wayside. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, Board, that takes us to our constituent reports. First up is ASNIC, Richard Fortman.
You know, I'm thinking that you put me first because you always have these wonderful presentations, and then I'm up next, so it's always a tough act to follow every time. Madam Chair, Board of Trustees, President's Cabinet, and guests, President Dunlap as well. I would like to first start off by saying that the Hypnotist show that I reported to you guys last time went very well. The Sentinel wrote an article on it, and it's interesting to read. The Sentinel is a great way to find out what's going on around campus, so I encourage everybody to pick up a Sentinel and read it. So, in addition to that, ASNIC is currently accepting applications to fill the 2015-2016 ASNIC board. All of the eligible candidates will hold a forum on April 8th in the dining room here in the sub. After that forum is over, candidates will start campaigning until April 17th. During that time, April 13th through 17th, a lot of dates here, the elections will be held. So you guys will soon have a new elected student government. And I'm assuming the rest of the constitution groups will also have new individuals as well. So this last Tuesday, at our executive monthly board meeting, we reviewed 4 resolutions. These resolutions are in order from Resolution 330, which states the student support for finding an alternative disbursement method other than Hire One, and I'll read you the resolution here real quick. With the current contract soon expiring, I propose that we urge the business office to look for better opportunities that students can receive their financial aid disbursements through. By contracting with a local bank or local entity, we would like to see lesser fees charged to students and an opportunity for efforts towards enriching our community. So that is a resolution that we did pass unanimously, and I think that it would be in the betterment for the students, and that is my job, is to represent the students. So On to Resolution 331. Resolution 331 approved the ASNIC 2015-2016 budget. Once again, that resolution was passed unanimously. Resolution 332 addressed disciplinary actions for not fulfilling required ASNIC duties, and that was passed unanimously in addition with the other two so far. And finally, Resolution 333 was in regards to an instructor-initiated withdrawal. Now, the instructor-initiated withdrawal, I'll go ahead and read to you the resolution, and then I'll let you know the results of it. We, as ASNIC, serving as elected representatives of the student body of North Idaho College, do not support Policy 50402 as it is proposed. We recognize that it may have merit, but not in its current form. We suggest opening the vote to all College Senate members, including staff, faculty, and students. We would like there to be a clear language as to when the policy will be used, ensuring a distinction between conduct, process, and instructor-initiated withdrawal, and to revise the appeal process to ensure due process for the students being withdrawn. Now, we extensively went over this resolution, and we talked about the ethics of letting students fail and some other things regarding this particular policy. It's been something that we also discussed in our workshops extensively. That being said, we had 3 abstained, 1 yes vote, and 2 no votes for this resolution. So it did not pass, but I still think that there should be continued communication between the students and this particular policy. We would like to have a voice on it next time. When in any policy that has anything to do with students, we would like a voice. So that is that. On to the last part. Finally, there will be an Easter egg hunt tomorrow from 4 to 6 p.m. There will be kids. There is an age limit of 12 years old, but it is open to kids of students of North Idaho College. So I think that that'll be really awesome. From my understanding, the Easter Bunny is going to be there, and I missed out seeing him last time, so I may show up. So there's also volunteer opportunities as well. So that concludes my report. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Thank you, Board. Mr. Nielsen.
Richard, how are you? Nice tie.
Thank you very much. I just bought it.
You mentioned 5.0402 and a division between the vote. Is there some language or some change in wordings that would give you a higher comfort level? Because this is just our first reading, so we would like to know if you had some suggestions on some of the language change in here that would give you better comfort.
The actual language of the policy, there's a little bit, there's some stuff that can be done with the policy, but more importantly, it's the procedures in regards to how a student could appeal, how the instructor notifies the student, some things of that nature. Dr. Burns was very helpful in coming to our meeting and discussing some things with us and how that it would be initiated. She said that she'd be willing to work with the students and get some things hashed out as far as the policy goes. That is an awesome step, and I thank you very much for that, and look forward to that, by the way, too, as well. But as far as the policy goes, there's just a division amongst some students that it could be kept, it could be taken away, but the language in the policy, I don't know if everybody agrees with the way that it is stated currently. But let me go ahead and just say, at the policy itself, the students, for the most part, are okay with. It's the procedure.
So if, follow up to that?
Certainly.
So Richard, what I'm hearing from you is if there was a process of a notification prior to this to give a person, one student, an opportunity to fix what is wrong that would force him to be removed, that would be a step that would let them be notified prior to just pulling them out? Or I'm still trying to figure out what you would like to see, some simple change or a process that would give you a better comfort level.
Yeah, currently there is actually a process in which the instructor emails the student. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm going to go ahead and go for it though. The instructor emails the student, and then the student has 48 hours to contact the student now, or to contact the instructor. And then there is a appeal process in which that if the student is not and does not like the decision of being withdrawn, they could go forth and go up the chain of command and then appeal to eventually Lita Burns and then Lita Burns. But it's the contacting of the student. It is a good thing that students check their email, but not all students check their email. So maybe contact them personally, or contact, if they cannot do personally, over a phone call. Just reaching out a little more intentionally instead of via email is what I think that part of the procedure that the students are looking for.
So, board, this is on the agenda,
Right.
and so I'm wondering if we should bring Richard back up after Dr. Burns makes her presentation if we have more questions for him. Does that seem fair to you? So we can get both perspectives. Will that work for you, board? Yeah, and Judy, you had, oh, yes.
I would just like to say that College Senate does consist of student representatives, but at the two meetings at which it was announced that this policy would be reviewed, no student representatives attended.
Okay, all right. Trustee Meyer?
Just to follow up, and I'm happy to be sure we get all the information we can. What I want to be sure and distinguish is policy from procedure.
Yes.
And what I hear is the issue is procedure, and we really don't have any say in that if the policy is set enough to say there has to be a procedure. And so I'm not sure how we channel the discussion here
Yeah.
if the policy works. So,
I think
let's wait
Dr.
and see.
Burns
But
can,
let's be sure we're thinking about policy when the time comes. Is that?
perfect. Would you like to speak now, or do you want to wait for the? Okay, great. All right. Anything else for Richard? And we'll bring you back if we have more questions.
Thank you. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you. That takes us to Staff Assembly. Carol Jones.
Good afternoon, Chair Wood and trustees and guests. Staff Assembly met on March 12th. Two NIC vice presidents graciously shared the spotlight as guest speakers. Mark Browning gave us a legislative update regarding the JFAC decisions, and Chris Martin visited with us regarding the college's goals for budget planning. Also, Registrar Tammy Half visited with us to ask for employee volunteers for OARS, which, as you'll remember, is the NIC orientation for students, and that starts at the end of May and goes throughout the summer. Jessica Grantham is an accountant with NIC's business office, and she's also the captain for the NIC team for the MS Walk event, which is on April 25th. It's a 5K walk to support multiple sclerosis, and the official name of the event is No MSing Around. So anyone who would like to join the NIC team for the MS Walk is welcome to do so, and you can simply contact Jessica Grantham or myself. Eveline Meltingtaulo shared some information on American Indian Heritage Week, which is April 6th through 11th in the Student Union Building. And as far as Staff Assembly news, we are going to be starting nominations the last week of March, and elections will run April 13th through 17th for our new officers, and then the new officers, as Richard mentioned, will be in position by our May meeting. Also, currently underway are nominations for our Staff Appreciation Awards. This is an opportunity for NIC employees to recognize their colleagues for outstanding service, and the winners are announced at the graduation breakfast in May. And Staff Assembly just wants to express their gratitude to the NIC Foundation and STCU for sponsoring these awards. And then last but not least, I want to officially congratulate Erin Davis and faculty for their win on the challenge for the Foundation's Employee Giving Campaign. And faculty's official tally was 72%. And staff 70%, with our overall participation rate in the employee giving campaign of 71%. So that concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Thank you, board. Any questions? Comments? Mr. Banducci?
Oh, you were referencing the Indian Heritage Week, so that must be the flyer that we have here with the old photos that are going to be dedicated in the library?
I have not seen that. I've seen a different flyer.
Okay. Oh, there's some great photos
Yeah.
on this. I love the one of the baseball players being a guy that played ball in college. Neat pictures. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your report. Next up, Erin Davis is back up for Faculty Assembly.
Hello again, Madam Chair, Trustees, President Dunlap, members of the President's Cabinet, colleagues, and guests. Faculty Assembly has actually met twice since my report to you last month. We had a special meeting on Tuesday, February 24th, and our regular meeting on Thursday, March 12th. As I reported to you last month, Dr. Burns spoke to us during our regular February meeting regarding the new faculty compensation policy and the proposed changes to the teaching focus policy. We so appreciate all the time she took to answer all of our questions, and because we spent most of our meeting on that, we did not get time to get to some of our other agenda items, including a really important report from our Meet and Confer committee members. So therefore, as a committee, or as an assembly, we decided to hold a special meeting on February 24th to hear a Meet and Confer report and to discuss possible ways we might want to kindly follow up with you on the resolution we presented to you in December regarding the maintenance of faculty and staff salary schedules. At our March 12th meeting, Carol Jones was so nice to stop by with a congratulatory balloon and a bag of chocolate and a big gift bag that says faculty rule, which was above and beyond gracious of her. And the faculty deeply appreciated the chocolate. And the leftovers have been in my office, and I don't know how deeply appreciated my waistline is right now, but anyway. But the most important thing is that we had a great turnout among all employees to support the good work that our foundation does in support of the mission of the college and our students. After Carol congratulated us, Vice President for Finance and Business Affairs, Chris Martin, then updated us on issues related to the budget for next school year. And we really thank Vice President Martin for taking the time to answer our questions. And we really appreciate the message he gave us about transparency and long-term planning in the budget process. At that same March 12th meeting, the Faculty Assembly unanimously approved and amended a resolution for me to present to you tonight regarding faculty and staff compensation. The resolution that I presented to you in December articulated the importance of steps in the faculty and staff salary schedules. The amended resolution I am presenting to you tonight more fully reflects the conversations that the Meet and Confer Committee has been having with President's Cabinet this year. And so the resolution is as follows. And I believe I have a lot of faculty colleagues in the room. If they want to stand in support of the resolution now, they are welcome to do so. We, the faculty of North Idaho College, appreciate the work that has been done by both the administration and the Board of Trustees to compensate the employees during difficult economic times and budget challenges. We are indeed grateful that we are able to communicate in good faith with the administration and Board of Trustees our position regarding the maintenance of the salary structure of North Idaho College. Wage and benefit considerations are important to both recruit and retain highly qualified faculty and staff. Specifically, vertical steps within salary schedules at North Idaho College are essential to recognizing the strong and continuing commitment of faculty and staff to working with the administration and Board of Trustees for the success of our students. We are reminded of this shared commitment as stated and implied in Policy 3.02.16. Regarding the maintenance of the salary schedule, it states, after initial appointment, advancement on the vertical steps shall be made on the basis of one step for each full year of full-time employment at North Idaho College. New faculty and staff agree to an initial level of compensation with the understanding that they will receive a step increase each year at their employment to a maximum of 20. Because steps at NIC reward experience and greater employee responsibility, they foster budgetary and academic stability for the college. While yearly maintenance of the steps is essential and expected, the steps alone do not allow for cost of living increases due to inflation. Thus, in addition to vertical steps to maintain a comparable standard of living, cost of living increases to the base are equally important. Failing to keep up with inflation reduces the overall purchasing power of employees. Therefore, we, the faculty of North Idaho College, resolve that, 1, in order to promote institutional financial stability, vertical steps for both faculty and staff salary schedules should be addressed as a regular line item in the budget and should not be tied to isolated variables such as student enrollment. 2, annual advancement on the vertical steps of the faculty salary schedule should be applied as per policy 3.02.16. 3, cost of living increases are important to faculty and staff. To ensure that wage levels don't deteriorate, an increase to the base wage and consequent vertical steps should be adjusted annually for inflation. 4, since adjunct faculty members are valued, adjuncts should also receive annual cost of living increases. Adjuncts with additional years of experience should be eligible for additional compensation. We just wanted to put that out there and make our position clear. We know we're going into the budget process next month, and we very much thank the board and the President's Cabinet for the opportunity to do so.
Great, thank you, Erin. Board, any comments on Erin's report? Well, Erin, I appreciate you coming forward and the faculty that came tonight to listen to the resolutions. We've had a great relationship for years on how we do meet and confer. And the board will have to sit and hash out where we're at with the budget this year. But overall, I think you should know that the board has historically shown strong support. And me personally, I hope we get back to where we need to be, but we need to work all that out through the budget process. Thank you.
This is.
Senate, Chantel Black.
Chairman, Board of Trustees, President Dunlap, and all of our guests. At the March 19th meeting, we reviewed 3 procedures. 2 were for a second reading. That is 3.02.14 drug-free workplace procedure, and then 3.02.15 conflict of interest procedure. Both passed the second reading unanimously. We also reviewed for a first reading 5.04.02 instructor-initiated withdraws procedure. This was again the procedure only, and that passed unanimously for a first reading. Are there any questions for me?
Board, do you have any questions on her report? Chantel, I wonder if we have any questions when we get to the, on the agenda, the instructor withdrawal, if you'd be available?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not going anywhere.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
And then, Board, if I may, before we go on to the next item, I wanted to get back to Richard's first resolution on the financial aid distribution. Dr. Dunlap, do you think we could have Graydon maybe speak to that at next meeting, just explain to us that conversation?
Sure, you
Okay.
bet.
Are you good with that, Board? Okay,
I'd welcome that.
thank you. That takes us to Dr. Dunlap, President's report.
Yeah, I've got it.
Madam Chair, trustees, and colleagues, I'd like to share with you some good news and achievements by our employees this evening. First of all, earlier this week, we had a panel discussion on the common read that all of you were provided a copy of, which is Nickel and Dimed in America. And that was a very good panel discussion. Several of the faculty are in the audience here today. Several faculty brought their classes to that discussion. And it was very, very good in terms of better understanding the work conditions that many of our citizens are subjected to. Second of all, I'd like to congratulate Mike Horswell, one of our art instructors. And you may have seen an article in the paper where his art was selected to be displayed in front of the Hayden Library. And he's one of the ones who was selected to do art in one of our roundabouts, which is very, very nice piece here on campus. So congratulations to Mike. The Board of Trustees is hosting a reception on April 22nd prior to the board meeting in Sandpoint. Approximately 40 NIC supporters from Sandpoint have been invited and then to stay for the board meeting as well. It will begin at 4 o'clock and go through 4:45. The board meeting, I believe, is scheduled to start at 5, and Shannon is arranging transportation for trustees and constituents and other college employees that desire to attend. Last week, not earlier, the community college presidents and the Board of Trustees met in one of our regularly scheduled meetings, and the topics we discussed were professional technical education funding, community college study that was completed about establishing a fourth community college in the southeastern portion of the state. We reviewed a legislative update, and we talked about out-of-district tuition. And as you are well aware, we started charging out-of-district tuition for career and technical students as well as dual credit students this past year, and this year CWI and CSI will follow suit. I attended the Office of Career and Technical Education Planning, Strategic Planning meeting last Friday, and there were 45 in attendance representing business, education, and government. We have not received the draft report yet from that strategic planning session, but as soon as I get that, I will disseminate it to the board and PC. But some of the topics that we covered were the image of PC with students and parents and business and industry. We talked about seamless curriculum and the transferability of credits from one institution to another. We talked about the equitability or lack of equitability of funding and how the funding for career and technical education programs ought to be formula driven. And just by way of example, if you look at the level of funding that Idaho State University receives compared with the community colleges, it's about 4 times per student than the community colleges received, and there needs to be some equitability there. We also talked about the sustainability of programs and how do we start new programs so that they are not at the expense of existing programs, and how do we sustain those into the future. I would also like to congratulate some of our NIC graphic design students at the Addy Awards presentation last week in Spokane. We had Corey Jeppesen received an Addy for collateral material publication design for the Inlander Summer Camps cover. And Brenda Paddock from Sandpoint also won an Addy for collateral material for a single poster that she had designed. I'd like to thank our NIC Foundation for the Bon Appetit, which is a fundraiser. And it was a spectacular event. They raised $49,000 for student scholarships, and several of you attended, and we certainly appreciate your attendance at that event. This morning, the Senate voted on the permanent building fund package that included our joint use facility, and that passed the House. It'll be read across. That passed the Senate. It'll be read across the House possibly tomorrow, which would put it into the second reading calendar on Friday, and then on the third reading and vote possibly Monday or Tuesday. So we're getting closer to that goal line of full approval for that particular funding piece. Some of the other funding pieces this year out of the legislature included through the career and technical budget, 2 faculty positions for our aerospace program and $25,000 for advanced manufacturing. In our general budget appropriation, we received initially $250,000 for advisors that will work with students to increase retention at the college. And then there was an additional approximately $200,000 that was funded based on JFAC's initiative that is for summer remediation. And it fits right in with Aaron's presentation tonight, that will fund faculty and programs to increase retention for our students. The legislature is also approving a 3% CEC increase. We're still not sure how that will be implemented. And as you are aware, the state allocation only covers a third of the cost for CEC, and the college will have to come up with the other 2/3. A bit of other good news: we had 12 NIC students that were awarded $5,000 each on scholarships through the NASA Idaho Space Grant Consortium. And the grants were made available through NASA for students to pursue degrees in science, technology, engineering, and math. The students can apply the money to finishing their degree at NIC or at transferring to another institution. Most plan to earn degrees in engineering, but computer science, biomedical, and mathematics are also represented amongst those 12 students. The students will participate in STEM-related activities through this spring, summer, and next year to qualify for 100% of the money. So congratulations to everyone involved. And we had 2 faculty members particularly instrumental: Eric Mack from our mathematics department, as well as Cheryl, who is our department chair for mathematics. We have 14 tenure files that will be presented at the next board meeting. Those files are available for review out of my office. We've got a conference room set aside should anyone want to review those. They are about 3 to 4 inches thick each. And so if you plan on reviewing those, I would plan on a considerable amount of time. Otherwise, Dr. Lita Burns has provided a very good summary for each one of those that would be good to take a look at as well. And then the last thing I want to mention is that on May 5th is GED graduation in Schuler Auditorium, and that will be at 7 p.m. And I would invite you all to attend. And Madam Chair, that concludes my report, and I'd stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Dunlap. Trustee Nielsen.
My question, Mr. Dunlap, is how do you distinguish the difference between PTE and CTE? Because you use both of those acronyms 5 or 6 times crossing over. So I would love to see if we could all come to, if we could take on the other 49 states that are using CTE and win over the PTE, or we surrender and go fight the people at Department of Education and conform with the rest. Where are we on that process, Joe?
I have spoken with the presidents of the other community colleges. They are all in favor of that. This issue was brought up at the CTE strategic planning session that we had, and so it's on the agenda. There was a sense, a very dismissive sense that, well, this is a legislative issue. And my response to that is that's irrelevant. It needs to be corrected because the other 49 states subscribe to CTE, and we quite frankly are tired of wasting 2 pages in every grant we write trying to explain why we are light years behind the other states. So it's moving at glacial pace.
Trustee Banducci.
Joe, with Mr. Johnson now in charge down there, it seems like he's really trying to listen and be engaged. We had a great meeting with him when we were down there. Is he helping lead that charge, or can he do that?
He can lead the charge and help lead that charge, and he was the one who pulled together this strategic planning group. And this is the first time that's been done in many years. And he has listened, I think, to the input that he has been provided over at least the first 6 months that he's been in the office. He's traveled around the state, and I think he's very receptive to it. But what we need is not only the interest of educational institutions, but we need to capture the interest of our legislators to get that changed as well. But Dwight Johnson is doing a good job.
Let us know if we can, how we can help with that, or what do we need to do with the local legislators. Obviously, they're a little engaged at the moment, but maybe that's something we can put a bug in their ear for the next go.
You bet. And I want to wait until we receive the draft report from that strategic planning session, and I'll send that out to everyone, before we decide how we want to maneuver on any of those initiatives, and whether this initiative, for example, rises to the import of some of the other items. And so once that happens, then we'll resurrect that. One thing I didn't mention is that when the community college presidents and the board chairs met here a week ago, we were already planning for the next legislative session and how we were going to develop a consistent message like we did this year. But one of the things that will be important next year is our workload adjustment. And that's something that is rarely talked about in the budget, but the impact is this, that while enrollment increases, and over a period of 8 years, this college experienced a 46% increase in enrollment, there was no increase in funding to speak of. However, as enrollment declines, the state wants to claw back some of the money. So they claw back the money that they didn't give us to start with, which helps explain why our level of funding is pretty much the same as it was in 2002, 12 years ago. So this will be another hot topic for us going into this next year. And I think we were fairly effective this year with our message, and the fact that it was consistent and coordinated. And this is now going to be another topic that I think we're going to all get on board with.
A follow-on question, if I may.
Certainly.
Joe, if I may, along that line, I'm getting your opinion now, I'm just kind of picking your brain, but I think it was encouraging to all of us to hear JFAC and the tone that they had in respect to trying to achieve a little more parity and regarding our funding versus the four-year institutions and that sort of thing. Are you hearing that that they were very friendly to us, that's something we can hopefully anticipate as we go forward in this next year or two as we discuss this issue?
Yeah, I think so. And just for everyone's edification, what happened was the governor's budget recommended a 1.5 increase for the community colleges. And JFAC was actually somewhat incensed by that because the universities were getting close to a 5% increase. So they called up the governor's budget analyst to the podium while we were there and asked him to explain why the community colleges were only getting a 1.5% increase and the universities were getting a 5% increase. And needless to say, he could not explain that. So what ended up happening is that JFAC added another 1.5% to our budget to bring it up to a 3%, and that's where we ended up getting funding for that summer remediation program.
Further? Trustee Meyer.
This kind of reminds me of the cognitive discussion we had a little bit ago. Folks in their thinking. To more from your concept of discussion about PT, CTE, I want to highlight the Business Journal article. And that led me, great article, and really I think is helping the community understand what's happening. That also reminded me, I had sent to you, Mr. President, and asked you to comment on the newspaper Inlander article about why kids aren't going to college, and not just kids. And one of the things that you clarified, I want to be sure and clarify again, is that for a while there was a $50 application fee amongst other schools, which you clarified again, we do not charge here. That's also the case for CTE applicants as well as academic, so anybody who wants to.
We did away with that probably a year, maybe a year and a half ago, because we were concerned that may be a barrier for people applying to the college.
And which was the case. It precipitated when I was in Boise talking with a cab driver lad who said he didn't choose BSU, he chose College of Idaho and had more financial aid there and no application fee. So it was real straightforward for him. How does that work then if we have a common application form amongst all the schools? as to how folks pay or don't pay the fee. If they're applying to BSU, apparently there is a fee.
The common application is strictly gathering a common set of data about an applicant. And the schools can charge whatever fee they want to as part of that. And so we still don't have fully implemented a common application, but we're getting closer.
Which is good to hear, and keep going. Okay, thank you.
Board, anything further for Dr. Dunlap? All right, thank you. Under old business, we're, well, wait a minute, our K-Tech report. Mr. Vanducci.
Yes, indeed. I had the privilege of attending the meeting on the 25th of February in Judy's stead. I believe Ron was traveling, I don't know to what far-flung region of the earth at that moment, but actually, Ron was with us there in February. So as I give this report, I was kind of teasing him. January, I was the only one there. But what I would like to do is I'll mention a couple quick things, and then I would like to give Ron the opportunity if he'd like to comment. And then I believe, was the other meeting this morning? So you both were at that meeting this morning, so you may have something even more current than what I have as a month delayed. So having said all that, let me be brief. One of the things that I thought was interesting is we try to put a little more traction to the concept of getting CityLink maybe service out that direction. And I think they're taking that as an action item, and I think they had some contacts, and they were going to, I think, reach out to the tribe on that. And so that was something I think is going to be very interesting to see if they can not just get the transportation out there, but one of the issues is not just doing that, but doing it in a timeline or a schedule that would work for people coming and going, to make classes when they start, when they end, if we're trying to service K-Tech and NIC, CTE facility. You know, that's one of the challenges, is to say get it out there, that's one thing, but we have some pretty particular timelines that need to be accommodated for that to work on both sides of the road there. So be interesting to see how that goes with the work with that. Anyway, that was one thing I thought would be great, especially in the inclement weather and for folks concerned about distance and cost. To those two over there, I defer.
Mr. Nielsen, Trustee Meyer.
We'll take a turn.
All right.
And needless to
Ladies
say, we
first.
probably both will take a turn. One of the first things to highlight was a fundraiser that K-Tech is doing this Saturday. It's hosted by Automotive Annual Car Show fundraiser. And it's this Saturday from 12 to 5, $3 a person. There are awards for different types of cars that people bring to show. So we're always glad to support K-Tech in that way. Our meeting today, the 25th of March, then is usually the same time as, or same Wednesday as our board meeting. Next month it will be on April 21st. We were juggling schedules. The things that I wanted to highlight, and I did as a board member on behalf of our board with the K-Tech board, was as they discuss enrollment numbers. Obviously, that's something we're going to need as a board then as they begin to plan for our new facility. So I specifically asked that they, folks there, be sure and stay in touch with our administration on enrollment numbers, because that's the crystal ball I think we're all trying to look at. We also touched on dual credit and dual enrollment, and again, the logistics of helping students be cost-effective in what they can accomplish at K-Tech, as well as integrate with what we're doing. Your turn.
Mr. Nielsen.
Well, the report made by the executive director there says that our enrollment is already projected at a 15% increase for next year. They're at roughly 350. They're going to a little over 400. And so they're fairly excited. Matter of fact, they're up against some of the class requirements were that they're actually oversold, and their consideration what they had the first year where that they had this huge influx of people, they actually went to an after-hours class. And so it's a good positive sign. The new executive director there, Tim Fortune's doing an incredible job. And you're seeing the working relationship between our college and that K-Tech is as good as I've ever seen it before. Doug Anderson was there. He's a great representation for the college. And where they're working on dual credit. So from this continued ongoing relationship and the growth that we're going to see, NIC will receive a lot of the windfall from the collaboration that's taken place here, and it was enjoyable to see this going on. And the excitement that you see between all three superintendents from our three school districts are part of that board, and they're as excited as anything to see the college come alongside, and the way that they've laid this college campus out, sharing facilities, sharing kids, and they'll see kids that will take entry level and continued education on that campus while they're still in high school. So it's a good marriage between there. We're really excited about what's going on and the way that they're working together to help the students, prepare them for post-education, whatever that is.
Fantastic. Trustee Meyer.
Just to follow up from Trustee Banducci's comment too, and in this article where the Student of the Month is honored, one of the observations was transportation for him was a challenge. And so I think as the K-Tech board is, again, trying to work with public transportation and the time blocks that it takes for folks to actually get to K-Tech, which really refers more to the K-Tech students, but then we'll need to think about that for our students as well in our facilities as we go along. So I think there's good integration, which is the goal, I think, with us visiting there. The next month meeting I mentioned is April 21st, and I think that was at 2 o'clock, wasn't it? So we'll check and see who can cover that one, but we'll be there.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
please. And Ron, help me with this one. Just, I haven't been there as often as you clearly, and Judy obviously more than me also, but just in the couple meetings that I've been able to sit in on, one of the things I guess would be a real positive to highlight is that the school districts in their cooperative effort, it seems like they're just right on with their budget and doing very well from that aspect. As we're talking about the budgeting process coming up and all the rest of it, just seems like those guys have done a real good job as stewards of that. And the reports that I've seen, the couple meetings I was there, seems like they're right on the money on that stuff. And you can speak to that.
I think Chris Martin could probably do this in his sleep. The numbers are so small comparison because they don't have the huge overhead. So from a budgeting process and a balance in the budget process, they've always got money set aside. So they're doing very, very well from a financial side. But the number that is overwhelming, and people don't understand this number, is 97.3. 97.3% of the kids that go to that school graduate with a high school diploma, a certification, and a job offer or continued education or military service. So for these kids that don't know what they're going to do, 97 out of 100 have a decision what they're going to do. Either going to go to work, they're going to go on to continued education, or they're going to go serve their country. Incredible statistic, and so I think that we need to look at this model, and there's people coming in from all over the country now looking at the model. So that's been a true success, and the success of NIC is what made K-Tech what it is today. The success of K-Tech and NIC working together will be the economic engine, in my opinion, and to see what we're doing in the aerospace and things like this, we're only just at the beginning of what this is going to mean for this community. So,
Completely agree. Trustees, I don't know if you had a chance to see, but I sent you the vision statement from 2006. Judy, you were here, Mick and I were here, and I was struck by how much we've followed that vision that the three districts and us all agreed upon, and so that was very satisfying to me. And I want to thank you, the three of you, for the effort you've put into serving on that board and making sure we're communicating very well and being involved. This is probably the largest project NIC's been involved in for a number of years, and it's very exciting, and we know it's going to open a lot of opportunities for our students. So thank you for your commitment to that. That takes us on to our
Old business.
planned unit development. Chris Martin.
Madam Chair, trustees, good evening. This is a follow-up from a last meeting requesting information about the planned unit development and the education corridor. And I provided some printouts so that you didn't have to read this from afar, but I wanted everyone in the audience to kind of see the discussion. So in regards to the planned unit development, the gray area there is part of the final approved PUD, or that brown space there, with the noted green space that has been built in, and that's already complete. So in context of this conversation is the proposed site for the Student Rec Center in relationship to the PUD. So in looking at the college's plans at this point for the PUD, this is the midterm phase, which we're in the process of, we're in this phase now. This is the 5 to 15-year phase for the PUD. That green box that you'll see there on the right is the community garden. And that green area with a beautiful building in the middle is the proposed joint use facility as it was proposed when the PUD was presented. So where we are looking at for the Student Rec Center is just south of the PUD area. It doesn't actually fall within any of the planned unit development. So we have no restrictions from the PUD for the proposed student rec site. And in researching the past facility master plans for the college, Trustee Meyer, you had a great question, and this was fun to get to look into. The last facility master plan was done in 1999, and where the proposed student rec center was at had a dormitory was scheduled for that, as was the space that is now the Meyer Health Science Center. So that, we did look at the facility master plan, but it was not relevant to our conversation today. It was greatly changed from what was envisioned at that time. But in relevance to the PUD, this site doesn't impact that, and we don't foresee any issues with the current planned unit development.
Thank you. Trustee Meyer.
I think I just heard you describe the fact that the site for the rec center now, in plans of years ago, had more dormitory space on it?
Let me make sure I've got this correct
That's right.
here.
Because that's the very reason, certainly we all want to be sure we've looked at where we are and looked at where the ripples go,
Absolutely.
because there's been talk sometimes about needing more dormitory space. And so what I want to be sure is we've not blocked ourselves in on some of these options that are ahead.
And so I'm happy to pass this around just so you can see it, because it's fun to look at. It's frankly fascinating. It was parking, and then across the street was a proposed dormitory building with what appears to be space for another academic building around the museum, the Powder Magazine.
All right.
Question there, Christie.
Mr. Banducci.
Chris, if I may, as I'm looking through the package you gave us, and I'm kind of scrolling through the pages, kind of 1, 2, 3, I see the community gardens. 4 makes sense to me. You've included the rec center, so I'm good to that point. Talk to me about number 5.
So number 5 is the PUD as it was presented to the city with all future options. And so this is envisioning the mill site completely built out, or the education corridor completely built out, and what types of space has been proposed and approved by the city for each portion of the education corridor. And so number 4 represents parking garages. Number 9 is college and university support. And number 1 is academic structures. So the majority of the structures we'll see there are academic in nature.
So, like, if I may, sorry. So, for example, we're 1 and 2, we're saying academic structure, PTE structure, that actually could be joint use facility. And in number 3, where it says joint sponsorship structure, that could even be cultural center with the tribe or something.
Correct.
Okay. I do have one more question. As we look at this potential build-out, and as we think about the joint use facility, and we look at the rec center and where we're putting that down in lieu of the tennis courts essentially, I'm understanding that we have an opinion that we don't have a parking problem, we have a walking problem. But does this acerbate our walking problem too much? How dense are we going to be, and are we going to have the room in there as we build out for the parking?
I think that's a great question, and it really probably will lead to a lot of discussion about the right place for the joint use facility. And so, as it was proposed, it's sort of the centerpiece of the education corridor. And at this moment in time, where the student rec center is proposed to be will have limited impact on parking. And so even with the joint use facility, if it was to go where it was planned right across the street, let me say this correctly, it puts the walk closer to the facility.
At what point does this exacerbate the parking issue? In other words, as we build out, when would you see that where we show as 4 and 9, which you referenced, the parking garage, in the sequence of this, how far out do you think we are before we'd actually really need that then? I mean, do you think that's a kind of a lower priority then
I
at
think
this
that's a
point?
midterm to long-term view at this moment in time.
Trustee Nielsen?
I think the parking and the walking problem are relative to what the weather is. So explain to me, Chris, this number 6. This is the first time I've ever seen a athletic field in the education corridor before. What's the date on this planned unit development, and I've never seen this before.
It's 2012, 2013 is the date on this, and this was what was submitted to the city in a long-term view. And so to speak to the options that are here, each of these spaces has specific unique restrictions. And the space that is option A is the least restrictive as far as height for any space within the education corridor. So this was a potential option, but I think that most of the conversation we've had with the city is ensuring that we are mindful of the height requirements of buildings on campus, and that we hold on to that space for unrestricted height as long as we can.
Follow-up to that. So what you're saying, this is a 12-13 development map, and it's irrelevant now because we've tried to put a CTE facility on that campus. We've tried to put parking on there, so this was one of the proposals. So this is not a suggestion that we're going to build.
This is an approved option of things that could happen on that land that the city has seen and has said we would be okay if that's a direction that you wanted to pursue.
So, Trustee Nielsen, you're right, you haven't seen it. You haven't been part of these discussions because they were before your time and it moved forward with the PUD planning. But I think it would be valuable for the board to just revisit this at some point in time and roll in the new trustees about the discussions and the limitations in the PUD, the height restrictions, so that you can be brought up to speed on everything we've discussed for the last 15 years.
And I agree 100% with you. And once we figured out where the CT campus, which was a number one mission, we've now got a place, it's going together, and so we don't have to worry about taking up any of the space here with this joint use facility now, that with the money that's coming in for that. So it'll be easy. It's kind of like filling in the crossword puzzle. Once you get about 10 of the 14 things, you can know where the next 4 are going. That's the first time I've seen an athletic field going on in the middle of an education corridor, so.
Yeah, and that's really just something, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, that would be approved in the PUD if we ever chose to do that.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that's what we'll do.
Correct. We've got all kinds of options with that space.
Right.
Come on, Ron, you gotta love it. It looks like a baseball field.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Trustee Meyer?
Following up on your observations, Christie, for those of us who've been involved in this before your time too, Chris, you're inheriting some of this, was the planning for the PUD had some requirements to be sure that the footprints were large enough for some future buildings. And so, as you can see there, the ratio of both parking and buildings was sketched out for various opportunities. The wonderful part is now, since that was done, we have 3 projects bubbling along. And so some of this may cross over into the PUD. Whether it does or not, it still has ripples. And so I think it is important that our board come together again with a 1999 plan, 3 new pieces coming into place to be sure we're ready for that joint use building. I think some of the funding was to do some planning and thinking about that. Today we look at the rec facility. which may not be in this PUD per se, but it certainly is, you've all identified, parking and traffic flow, people as well as automobiles are all part of this operation. The community garden is another new part that wasn't there then. And as we look at option A on that map, which I think reflects the private ownership of those lots south of the words option A, is that correct? Or is option A, because then option C is on the bottom right, so where is
They all
option
fit
B?
in that same, they're all fitting in that same space, that option A, which is currently the parking lot. So those can each interchangeably fit in that same space. This
Okay.
currently does not impact any of the Military Heights area.
That's right, and we need to be clear about that too. As neighbors, we happen to own some pieces of property in there, but this PUD is isolated from that area. But I guess as our board chair, you get to figure out when we get together again, but I would say in the next couple of months would be useful to do, because I expect we'll be back to the legislature offering them other opportunities to help fund, and so we need to know what we're setting up to have happen.
Yeah, my suggestion is, once we have a final word on the funding, we do pull together a meeting and get our maps out, and certainly let Ron and Todd have a look at what we've been talking about all these years, and certainly, I think maybe in writing, Chris, outline the rules of the PUD. We have it.
Yes, we have it,
bring
and
it.
I'm happy to provide that.
Okay. Mr. Nielsen?
Madam Chair, I would strongly recommend that before we even considering hiring another consultant, we're consultant obsessed. $100,000, 7 consultants, and then we went against most of what they had because we had more information and more input when it comes to the CT campus. So when we get in to how we want to structure it, I think we as an educational institution have some of the smartest people on the planet working here, people that know this facility and know where we're taking this. We should get together and see if we can't come up and put together what we think makes sense before we go hire another consultant that gets us all distracted, a lot of time. And if you look at the process that Chris took us through on this campus and what we're doing, it was quite an education. It was highly energetic, and at the end of it, I think we came to the right conclusion, and we did it without the consultants being there. So I think that I think we have to be very careful that we don't start out by doing what we always do, which is let's get a consultant to come in.
Okay. All right, well, when the time comes for that proposal, we'll address that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the Student Rec Center proposal. You're up. Graydon Stanley, John Totten, Richard Fortman.
Madam Chair, members of the board, President Dunlap, colleagues, students, and guests. Speaking of long-term plans and no consultants, we're particularly anxious to present to you a follow-up to our discussion from last month's meeting in regard to the Student Rec Center. As you recall, there was an extensive presentation made to you that outlined the process that we've been through to develop what the programming's like, what the building's like, what the student support is like. Most of that remains unchanged from probably over the last 12 years, so we're particularly anxious to be in front of you again tonight and ask for your support of the student request for the development of a student rec center. I want to acknowledge again the work of the committee because they've done such an outstanding job, and it does reflect upon, as you said, Trustee Nielsen, all those smart people who work for us that are really experts in their field. And that starts certainly with the chair of our committee, John Totten, who's done just a dynamic job in chairing this group. From Richard, our student body president, who has represented the student interest all the time very well. Steve McGordy, who's done a fabulous job with finances, along with Sarah Garcia from the business office, Jess Bennett in the programming end, Heather Erickson, and many, many others who have been a part of that committee. Most importantly to know is that that committee consists of all stakeholders from here on the campus, instruction and student services, students, business office, to off the campus, community representatives as well. So I compliment the group on what an incredible job they've done in bringing all the right people to the table and providing what we think is the information that you need to support the students' requests. What you're going to hear tonight is addressing a bit of a repeat, some of the information that you had access to last month, but also addressing a few of the questions that you had. One of those was the support of the Dormitory Housing Commission. I know you have in front of you tonight a letter from the Dormitory Housing Commission expressing their support for that project. Mick Arman is also here as well, representing Dormitory Housing Commission. Location was a concern that you addressed, and much of that, I believe, was addressed in what Vice President Martin just talked to you about, the use of our campus that way. Tennis courts was a concern that was brought up, and you'll hear a quick response to that, and we've addressed that in the best interest of the college and, more importantly, this community. And lastly, what we're probably most excited to share with you tonight, I think there's a concern about the cost to students for developing this facility, and particularly the return on that investment. And I think through the good work done in this committee and the support of the business office, you will be, as I was, very pleasantly surprised about the plan that's been put together for the financing of this building. And lastly, I would encourage you to consider tonight, and you may have noticed it in your tab, is that we're asking you to take action on this request tonight. In one sense, it's considered a first reading, but I would probably back you up a month and suggest to you that potentially, although it wasn't labeled that way, we had such a hearty presentation and discussion last month that a lot of that was put out in front of you. We have some needs, we believe, to ask for your support tonight because of the budget process that's in front of us and the work that the Dormitory Housing Commission has yet to do to arrange the financing. For us to capitalize on the best cost, the best plan, the best timing, we're asking for your support of that facility tonight. I would now like to introduce you to, again, the chairman of that planning group, John Totten.
Thank you, Graydon. Madam Chair, trustees, President Dunlap, and all of you good-looking people, thank you for being here. I'm really happy to be in front of you all again. Really proud to represent the campus and most importantly the students as we continue our effort to provide adequate recreation and opportunities for our campus. One more time, Graydon did a great job here, but I just do want to recognize our committee and have you realize the diversity and expanse that we had across the campus. And I do want to recognize how we did have a couple of consultants that did some great work for us and helped us in a few areas, but for the most part, this was definitely a homegrown program. What we're going to do tonight is I'm just going to give you an update on what's happening here. We're going to hear from Richard one more time with regards to the student perspective. I'm going to summarize the project to this point, and then we're going to review the financial impacts because those are the areas that have changed since the last time we presented, and we'll move on from there. So at this point, I'll welcome Richard to review our student perspective.
Wow, months gone by, right? I tend to forget some things. So what I'm going to do is the student perspective, I'm going to go ahead and reiterate what I said last month, and then I'll make a small statement at the end of that. So addressing the current facilities, the first issue would be accessibility. Currently, many of the areas designated for recreational related opportunities are not accessible to students with disabilities. I have a letter from Tim Gerlitz, that Director of Disability Services, that documents these issues. Second is student accessibility. All indoor areas that can be used for recreation are being utilized at a 90% capacity by the college-related programs. This leaves a 10% usability window for the non-programming uses for students, staff, and faculty. This translates to a 1 hour a day or 5 hour a week window for students in Winton Hall and Christensen Gym. I have a letter once again from Paul Manzardo stating these facts in greater detail. Lastly, the age and size of the current facilities. The age and design of both the facilities do not make them well suited for expansion, and due to the size, only leave room for the majority of usage for college programming. In short, the Recreation Center addresses these issues, I'm happy to say. Student support for the Recreation Center. The project's been going on for over a decade, and the student support has been overwhelming. The voice of the students that I'm representing tonight represents the voice of over a decade of students. That's thousands of students. It'd be foolish of me not to ask of you tonight for a yes vote on the Student Recreation Center, and thus I will ask you right now for that yes vote. Seeming as that, to me, it's a no-brainer. But that's my perspective as being the student body president. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and give it back to John. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Richard. Just a brief summary again of how the project has worked out. We started last spring, and we worked in 3 areas: philosophy and programming, facility location and pre-design, and financial impact. We began meeting in August and have been ever since, up until today. In February, we had our initial meeting with the Dorm Housing Commission to introduce them to the project. They were very warm in their acceptance and have since offered you the letter of support for the project. And we were before you in March, and here we are again. And just to highlight that on April 9th is our next Dormitory Housing Commission meeting, which is prior to your April board meeting, which is part of the reason why we really support a decision this evening, because of the timeline with that group, and they've got their work to do with the bond, and so this is all kind of coming together that way. Just a reminder on the mission and the programming priorities. The mission of the Student Recreation Center is to provide opportunities which foster community engagement and instill a sense of belonging through physical activity. We envision a dynamic program that engages every participant and promotes physical fitness and overall wellness. We provide a positive environment for students to develop both personally and professionally by offering many opportunities for involvement. And just to review our priorities for the facility, priority 1 is student recreation and wellness, open recreation and wellness opportunities for our students. Priority 2, meaning the NIC community recreation and wellness, which refers to our staff and faculty's fitness and wellness opportunities. Priority 3 will be physical education curriculums. We'll have a state-of-the-art facility to offer our vast PE program offerings and expand those, hopefully. And then priority 4 will be community group reservations and rentals. And so while the use will not be open to the community per se, where they'll be able to buy a membership, we will be able to do group events and things like that to generate revenue and support the facility. And review here the vast opportunities that will be offered, and these are some of the highlights with a rock climbing wall, running track, fitness, free weights, and so on. So as you can see, there's a vast number of opportunities, many of which do not exist currently on our campus. The site considerations, just in review, and I want to thank Vice President Martin for clearing up the bigger picture for us there. But as we mentioned last month, we went through an extensive process in choosing the location and came to the location just south of River Avenue here, where the current tennis courts are located. The physical space, the central location, the support from all constituent groups on campus, and the feasibility of construction were the main highlights in why we chose this location. In regards to tennis courts, we did do a little research. I want to thank Jess Bennett, and she had communicated with our recreation folks here in the city of Coeur d'Alene. There are 6 different tennis courts that are located all within 6 miles here of campus, but we want to highlight the brand new ones at McEwen, and we've actually heard from some of our students in the last few days that are tennis enthusiasts that said, we don't play on campus, we play at McEwen. And so we really want to assure you that the demolition of those courts and the replacement of it with a recreation facility is not going to impact our tennis players here in the community. And with that, I want to hand it over to Steve McGroarty to update you on the financial information.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, trustees, President Dunlap, members of our President's Cabinet, and friends. My name is Steve McGroarty. Generally, I represent our Student Services Division through Auxiliary Enterprises. Tonight, I bring forward to you, let me rephrase, my charge of this afternoon is to resume the financial information discussion that we began last month. The first 3 slides are a review of the project cost, bond summary, and debt service. The ensuing slides highlight our pro forma projections with the new rate proposal and associated coverage. Our project cost slide summarizes the construction and development cost. Total construction costs, including site development, equal $5.97 million. The remaining items comprise the total project cost. Our project soft costs equal $1.37 million, and our FF&E cost of $325,000. Bottom line, total project cost at the $7.66 million. Our bond summary statistics again. This is a 30-year term. At this time, the terms are based on May 1st, 2016 through May 1st, 2046. Total interest is about $7.3 million, and total debt service then at over $14.5 million. The maximum annual debt service during that time period is $521,000, and our average annual debt service for years 7 through 30 are $518,000. If you recall, last month, the years 1 through 6 are interest-only payments at $345,000 annually. The average coupon at this time is 4.88%. Our annual debt service picture then, through the authority of our Dormitory Housing Commission, we'll start with our Series 2008, which represents the debt service on this, our Edminster Student Union building, 2 years remaining at $817,000. The Series 2012 bond represents the bond for our residence hall. That matures in year 2022. You'll see an acceleration in year 2018 after the maturity of the Series 2008, again, the Student Union bond. There's $4.4 million remaining to maturity on the Series 2012 Residence Hall bond. Series 2016 is what we will, at this time, call our Student Recreation Center bond. Those payments, you'll see the $345,000 interest only for our fiscal years 2017 through 2022. Beyond that, in the year 2023, we'll start to normalize a little bit at that $520,000 figure. Our total debt service then through year 2023, based on this scenario, is this $7.8 million in the bottom right corner. Those are the three of the slides that we looked at last month, and now we'll begin some new information. When we presented last month, we came to you with the proposal of what a $100 fee per semester per full-time equivalency student would look like. I will go back to the student services fee, and you'll see that $93 per full-time equivalency student per semester. The student services fee, again, is the student union fee that pays for debt obligation and operational costs for this, our Edminster Student Union building. The Student Recreation Center fee then, this year, obviously there's no fee associated. In 2016, we introduced a $37 fee per full-time student per semester. As we combine then both fees for our proposed Student Recreation Center and Student Union building, the total, what we'll call a student building fee, is $130 per semester. Beyond that, in the fiscal years 2017 and beyond, in this particular slide through 2022, we are maintaining a $93 fee for the Student Union building and introducing to you an $87 fee per full-time equivalency student per semester. The combination of those two fees then is $180. Fiscal year 2022, you'll notice, has a bit of a different color associated with it. The $93 fee for this building, the Student Union building, has not changed. The $87 in this viewpoint hasn't either, but in that year, 2022, we have an opportunity to revisit the rates that we would be charging based on this scenario as our Series 12 2012 Residence Hall bond lowers itself to a maturity in that same year. And if there are any questions, be happy to take those.
Thank you. Mr. Banducci.
Steve, you're mentioning the fees are for full-time equivalent students. are they then just prorated for a part-time student? Someone comes on, is it for credit-only students? Someone comes on for something that's not a for credit class, are they also paying a fee?
This is a prorated fee for all of our students who pay all of our normal fees.
For credit or for not credit? Both?
That's the answer.
Help me out, Graydon.
Madam Chair, members of the board, it is in fact for credit-paying students. For those students who are part-time to be able to utilize the facility, we anticipate that they'd have an additional charge that would bring them up to the same rate of pay as a full-time student. They could have a membership which afforded them all the same privileges, but they'd have to make up the difference between their part-time fee and a full-time fee.
One more question, if I may. I see how you've staggered this, mentioned that before. In my business, we call it laddering. Mick will recognize that term. Do we have anything else on the horizon? Because once you do this, it looks like we're pretty well locked in. You know, Trustee Wood and Trustee Meyer talked about how there's been 15 years into looking at the big master plan, and then one of the things that Trustee Meyer said is, well, here's a couple other dorms maybe. So, you know, suddenly if you decide we need another dorm, how do you stagger or ladder that in? We've got ourselves locked in for quite a long time here.
Having daily exposure to our residence life operation, my opinion is there is a very much more significant need for a student recreation center than our dormitory, than an increase in our dormitory beds at this time.
We don't have anything else on the horizon that you're aware of at this time?
Any other facility?
Yeah, any more bond expenditures through the dormitory?
No, there's been no further discussions regarding any further bond expenditures. Right. So keeping in mind also that the bonding, again, for this building, the Administrative Student Union building, our residence hall, and the proposed student recreation center is also supported by our auxiliary enterprise operation. Those being the operations of our Micah Peak Exchange bookstore, North Idaho College dining services, our residence hall, and a blend of our student union operations as well. So that has to be figured in and calculated in this entire scenario, and we'll show that in a later slide when we combine all of those funds.
Trustee Meyer.
And I think that's a theme we need to be sure we've thought through. Over the years of being on the board, there were times when there was great need. For a while, the dormitory wasn't full, and then it got really full, and then there was a need for more. And I've been thinking about that because of our layout of the plan for where the student rec center goes had always been the place where there was talk about a dormitory going, because it could be extended from where it is and so on. So I just want to be sure that we've thought through the fact that we're content that we're not going to need a dorm for a while, if ever. Many community colleges don't provide student housing anyway, so that's another option. It can be off-site housing is certainly another one, and therefore leaves the heart of the campus for campus activities, and the housing occurs somewhere else. But we need to think that through a little bit, because your point is fair that what more fees might be coming along, and the place I hear could be for a dormitory. Are there any other kinds of buildings that would be coming along that would have a fee with them, or bond issues that we need to factor in? And I guess that's really back to administration.
Yeah, I think Trustee Meyer, that's board discussion, and as you know, we haven't come up with another building that we would like to bond right now.
But we're looking at 2022, 10 years out or more with this commitment. And I just want to be sure, we as a board have heard from the administration on what you foresee in your crystal ball for either dormitories or any other building that has bond.
And that's only part of the timeline. Remember, this is a 20-year bond.
It's a 30-year bond, so we're
30-year,
looking
excuse me,
to
30-year bond.
2046, correct.
First, 6 or 7 were interest only?
Yes.
Sorry. And then, so 30 years, that's really out to about 2045. Now, some others will expire, but that was my concern is.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's a long way out, that's all. And I don't want to see anybody's hands tied for the long term.
Mr. Nielsen, did you have questions for Steve?
No.
No. Okay,
Have some discussions before they're.
Absolutely.
Okay.
did you have more?
Just a note then on the any possible bonding related specifically to student fees in the future. The Dormitory Housing Commission has the financial authority then over student-centered buildings. There's been no discussion regarding any further student-centered buildings. The residence hall, there's some capacity there. So as we talk internally and think about whether a residence hall is a likely future, I wouldn't say no, but again, I would restate that the greater demand lies with the student recreation center than an addition or another residence hall.
And that's probably the point that we as a board need to understand and agree to, because once the train leaves the station, there would not be a chance to expend the dormitory space because the student rec center would be there. It's not good or bad, just it's a different phenomenon than we've ever had before. Where it
Right.
was,
And really, though, also, as we say, this bond extends out to 2046, we do have quite a bit of flexibility after year 2022 when the residence hall bond does mature. So no further debt there. The only debt that the college will have via the Dormitory Housing Commission is the Student Recreation Center.
And Mr. Nielsen?
What other colleges have you talked to them about their student rec center, and what is their, this is real easy. I mean, if you have whatever the costs associated with this, $7 million is going to $14 million financed over 30 years, and here's what it's going to cost per month. The real unknown is what is the operating cost, what is the replacement cycle of all this equipment, and what is the upkeep of this facility, and what's the overhead of this. So have you talked to other colleges that have taken a project of this size, Arn, and looked at what they estimate that their operating cost is and divide that into and figured that all the way down through the full cycle of all? Now we're replacing rowing machines and treadmills every 2 years, and the track has to be done and the gym has to be done. I mean, it's all part of the operating cost of running a facility of this size.
Certainly, and there have been discussions via site visits with other colleges. Mainly, we took that upon ourselves to develop that pro forma. We shared those projections with you last month, and we'll look a little bit deeper via summary view here in the next couple of slides. So we have factored in replacement costs into our annual operating. We factored in the income estimates, our personnel, and all of our operational and maintenance costs as well, yes.
Steve, I'm wondering, do you have more slides you want to present?
Yes.
Okay.
I have one more quick question.
rolls on.
Well, I want to let him do that, and then board, with your permission, I'd like to bring up Mick Arman from Dormitory Housing Commission. He can answer some questions about the bond that I personally have, and maybe some of you would like to ask as well. So can you hold yours, or?
I just want to clarify, you were saying in 2022, there's the possibility that the fee could be reduced.
So the residence hall bond is at $800,000+ until the fiscal year 2022. It drops to just over $300,000. There's a $500,000 reduction going into fiscal year 2022. The bond also matures in that year.
Okay, continue, thank you.
This slide demonstrates then what we'll call our base year income projection. Our student fees at $566,027. That's based on the $87 rate. We talked last month about other categories, so we're looking at memberships. There will be utilization fees for rock climbing wall. We have other programming and rental fees, concessions and retail, miscellaneous. So the base year projection income is $678,000. If you recall, last month, our student fee line item only was $633,700.
So the question is, the enrollment numbers you're using for student fees?
So the way that we calculated, we use one of our fees that are currently in place for this year. And then we took that number, we applied the $87 rate, reduced by 10% the enrollment, so that we would have that 10% as the college may forecast via budget for this next coming year.
And Steve, you said this is for the $87 amount, not for the 37.
Correct.
So we'll be a little slight of that, a little shy of that for the first year.
So we'll see the $200,000 number coming up. And an income and expense projection, again, the $678,000 is the total, fees and other. And again, the expenses associated, our cost of goods sold, personnel expenses, our operating, our debt service, which is the interest only for those first 3 years, and a net income estimated via this pro forma for the fiscal years 2017 through 2022, generate a positive net income of $96,000. The Student Recreation Center coverage analysis then for fiscal years 2016 through 2022. In fiscal year 2016 is when we are introducing a $37 fee that will generate $240,000 in income. And by the way, if we wanted to put an enrollment number on that, that number would be 6,506. Fees and other expenses for next year, those associated with planning and development costs, RFQ costs, permit expenses at $240,000. So really, this is a break-even scenario into next fiscal year at the $37 per full-time equivalency. The building won't be open, so non-operational. As we look at fiscal years 2017 through 2022, then we'll see the $566,000. Again, that's that 6,506 number at an $87 rate. The fees and other expenses are a combination for this demonstration of the other income and all of our expenses, operational personnel expenses. Our net pledge revenues then are $441,000. The debt service, as we mentioned, the interest only for those first 6 years. And our debt service coverage then is at 1.28, and the benchmark is at 1.25. We'll see the $96,000 available for capital outlay, which is our net income for those base years. That's the net change per year. The combined funds slide is really a summary of the coverage analysis that you have in your board packet. Pledge revenues, again, are from the Student Recreation Center, student services fee, again for the Edminster Student Union Building, and our auxiliary enterprise. Same for our fee and other expenses. So our net pledge revenues for the year fiscal 2016 are just over $1 million at 1.022. We have a total debt service of $820,500. You'll see our debt service coverage achieved at 1.25. We have available for capital then just short of $202,000. The capital outlay that we're budgeting for next year is $648,000. This is greatly impacted by a student union building refresh that we have forecasted in our budget for next year at well over $500,000. This is a project that has been in discussion for a number of years. We've actually budgeted for it previously, and for a number of reasons, being conservative, timing issues, this is the year in which we believe that will happen, and so that's part of that $648,000 number. The net change then for all our combined funds for next year is a negative $446,000. However, we are still able to achieve our debt service coverage at 1.25. In the fiscal years 2017 through 2021, you'll see our pledge revenues at $5.3 million. Fees and other expenses at 3.8, giving our net pledge revenues $1.4 million. Our debt service then will increase to 1.16. And our debt service coverage is at 1.24. If you, on your coverage worksheet, you'll see in the next couple of years, it's actually at 1.25, and then we have some dip into the 1.24, but we think that we'll be able to adjust to that either via enrollment or operations. So available for capital in the middle column at $279,000, and our capital outlet at $177,000. We're generating a positive net income of $101,000. And then in fiscal year 2022, and I'll just come to the bottom, and as we look at a potential net income of $571,000, that's where we have opportunity to then discuss that rate structure when the residence hall bond matures.
All right.
That's your secretary.
Trustee Nielsen.
And how many students is this calculated on?
6,506.
Which
Second,
includes,
the
yeah.
second question, CTE, if the CTE student is getting credits, he is also responsible to pay this.
If they are credit students, yes.
So a CTE student that's out at our new campus, that goes onto that campus, that comes out of there, that says, I will never use this facility, we're still going to have him pay the $100 fee for that.
It would either be $37 for next year, or we're proposing $87 beyond. But yes, that is the proposal, just as any other student that we have here on campus or outreach areas as well.
And I think, Mr. Nielsen, I'm going to call her she.
Yes.
She, not he.
Oh, okay.
And we did talk about this last month, that certainly that the CTE students, I believe our ASNIC reached out to them that there would definitely be an interest in having access to this facility. Trustee Meyer.
Follow up on that, because you reminded me again then, folks who are enrolled anywhere in our satellite operations also have the opportunity to pay that fee.
Indeed.
So when they're on campus, they can use it, but they may be online for classes and may not be here very often, but they've paid the fee, so they have access to it.
Yes.
They're credit students. Thank you.
Trustee Howard, you had your injured hand raised. Welcome. Did you have a comment?
No, I was going to ask the same question, make the same comment that
Oh,
Trustee
okay.
Meyer did.
Okay.
Just to sort of finalize an earlier point, and that is, if you are a part-time student and it is prorated, if you want to use the facility in order to make it equitable to all, they will pay the difference between either the 37 or the 87 and whatever credit hours they're paying.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. I think this would be a good time to ask Mr. Armand to come up, and then we'll ask him some questions about the bond. And then apparently, John, you will wrap up the presentation. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Armand.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me be
Glad
here.
you came tonight. We appreciate it. I always have questions, so I can hold mine board if you have some questions for Mr. Armand.
Not till after.
All right, well, I'll
Sings
start
and
then.
dances.
Okay, go ahead.
We are being asked tonight to consider this as a second reading, and last month would have been the first reading. We didn't label it that way, but that's what's being asked of us tonight. And it has entirely to do with the Dormitory Housing Commission and your April anticipated meeting. Can you walk us through that, why it would be important to make a decision?
Well, the Dormitory Housing Commission only meets twice a year normally, and we have an annual meeting, then we have a meeting later on in the fall. And even though it's only 3 people on our Dormitory Housing Commission, it seems like it's hard to get all 3 of us together. We have a meeting scheduled for April 9th, and at that point in time, it's our annual meeting. We would not only like to address this issue, but we address all the other issues that we deal with on this campus. At that point in time, we would then, if it's approved at this meeting tonight, we could look at it as far as approving it through the Dormitory Housing Commission. And at that point in time, start dealing with bond counsel and also the bond representation that we're working with. We've already had some discussion with them, but it's a process that does take some time. We would like to then get ready to do a request for the bond bid and start moving forward in get that direction.
Thank you. Board, did you have questions for Mr. Armand about the process? I had a question about, I believe I know the answer, but you can educate all of us anyway. The process really doesn't start for the Dormitory Housing Commission until NIC either approves this, or if we don't approve it, it goes away. But we need to take action before your committee can review it, is that correct?
You know, it's a chicken and egg. It really is. I mean, it's a situation. I mean, it's interesting sitting here listening to the discussion. I was on the board back in 2000 when we were first talking about the master plan. And in that master plan, there was discussion of a rec center for the students. And at that point in time, it was, okay, do we approve it, or does the Dormitory Housing Commission approve it? So this has been going on now for a better part of 14 years. At this point in time, as a Dormitory Housing Commission, we have given you a letter with somewhat tacit approval of going forward on this process. At this point in time, we cannot move any further until we have a lease agreement with the college for property to build a facility on, and also have approval of the student fee to start funding the bonds. So it's going to be, if you do not take action tonight, we cannot take action in April.
Thank you. Mr. Nielsen.
Mr. Armand.
Yes, sir.
This is a 15-year discussion. This is really our first reading that we've had. And if there's 3 board members, I mean, when we started this, the first clarification is what is the taxpayer's position, responsibility, and the answer is none. So that was the first education for myself and Todd who came onto this. We had concerns about location, if we choose the tennis courts, impact on enrollment on $100, and then to talk about all this, we've gone all the way through, for us to bypass the first reading so that 3 people can get together, and you've scheduled the 9th, my suggestion would be is you schedule one on the 24th and let us go through our due process of examining this and being a chance to be able to review this. So I'm going to be the one that's going to say is that I think most of my questions are answered, but anytime I make a decision under pressure where we got to make a decision now, I always say no, because I always regret feeling like I've been pushed to do this. So do you believe it's possible for your 3 board members to meet, instead of on the 9th, move it to the 24th, 2 days after our next board meeting?
You know, Ron, I don't have an answer to that because I'm not sure of the other schedules. I know I'm out of town on the 24th, so I will not be here. But I mean, it doesn't matter if it's 24th or 28th or whatever date thereafter. I mean,
Right.
I mean, the process has been going on for a long time. You're right. I guess as a Dormitory Housing Commission, we would like to try to work with the Board of Trustees to get this resolved. You know, one way or another. I mean, it's something that's been brought to the Dormitory Housing Commission a couple different times by the students. It's been brought to the board a number of different times over the last number of years. I know that for a fact. You know, Ron, I don't have an answer for you. I mean, we could sure try to, you know, work within the second reading in April. That's not a concern.
Well, and I hope you understand.
No, I understand.
I just look
I've
at
been
this
in
and
your
say
shoes
is that
before.
we're talking about a $14 million commitment, and it doesn't matter who's making the commitment, it's a $14 million commitment. And there's a lot of other things were all been part of this consideration. So this is a big of a proposal that we've seen next to the CTE. Both of these, when we came onto the board, were ongoing issues that you guys started. Now we're at the goal line, and we're prepared to do what we can to get it across. But for us to say, using the Seahawks analogy, we want to pass the ball. We should have ran the ball the last 2 times. So I want to run the ball one more month and go through due process on the second reading. That's my position.
Okay. Just a couple of points of clarification too that I think, you know, for both you, Todd and Ron, as far as the Dormitory Housing Commission goes, and when you look at the numbers that are being presented here as the bond service, the Dormitory Housing Commission has the ability to fund any kind of fees that are generated by the students. So in this case, what we're looking at with the Student Rec Center would be a direct student fee. In this case, $83 per semester per student. If you look at the dormitory housing situation, where the dorms are being the students pay for the use of the facility, those are not student fees in the same direction, but they still come through the Dormitory Housing Commission. You could use another example, say if you go to some campuses, parking garages, where a parking garage is funded through the same method, but the parking fees that are paid by the users, no different than the dormitory, the users are the fees that pay for that. So when we as a Dormitory Housing Commission look at student fees, we kind of break them in different pots, so to speak. User fees versus the service fees, say for this facility or for like a rec center or something like that. So when we look at debt service, that's how we kind of break that out, so that it doesn't look like you're committing yourself for a period of 30 years, which I mean, when you are for any financing you are, but it's somewhat different buckets to fund the different areas. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Trustee Meyer.
In thinking about Trustee Nielsen's observations, what are the consequences? Let's see, I think I remembered one you'd already thought of delaying this decision. Meaning you have to meet after we meet, for instance. But I thought there was one other consequence that I lost track of. But
The
so I
real
wanna be sure.
consequences, Judy, is that we've been working with bond counsel and bond representation here to try to kind of keep the process moving forward. Now, I mean, we're talking 3 weeks difference, or a week or two difference after that. So I mean, it's not like we're talking a whole long time here.
So be sure the ripples don't come back to bite us later.
We set our meeting kind of based on our 3 calendars, and Sarah can probably reschedule our meeting for us to try to, because she has to schedule our meetings for us, somewhere later in April or early in May. It's not going to change that much. We thought we scheduled a meeting timely enough after this meeting, so that if there was any information you had to get back from this meeting to satisfy it, you could. But we want to work with you. We're going to be flexible.
That's very helpful that we know that you can, it isn't locked in stone. You can meet after our next meeting.
Sure.
Trustee Howard.
Every time I scratch my head, you call on me. I don't.
I know,
I walked in late, so I take it there's no motion pending, right?
Well, there's been a request, but no.
Okay.
Yes.
So we don't have a specific motion we're talking about. I guess I just want to comment on the first reading versus waiting until the second reading. I mean, from my perspective, the first and second reading is not just for us to think about it, it's also for an opportunity for the public to listen to the presentation, to afford them an opportunity to make comments and to get input. And I know we've had a lot of work that was done by the students in terms of surveys and that sort of thing. But if there are constituencies out there that have some reason why they would oppose this, then this is an opportunity, and we afford them an opportunity to come in and during the second reading. If we shortcut that process, we really cut off their opportunity to do that. And I always get a little concerned about that. But second thing is, I think because it's our responsibility to okay the additional fee, I'd like to see that done in the context of what is the budget for this next year. And we're going to have our first reading of the budget in April. So I don't expect there's going to be any conflicts there, but I haven't seen that budget, and I don't know what it might mean in terms of tuition increases or something else. So the timing, I think, is best from my perspective for those 2 reasons, to wait for a second reading so that we have that information in front of us. And I appreciate your comments that you might be able to get the Dorm Housing Commission to meet after that within a timely fashion so that we don't slow you up too much, because I understand the need to get these decisions made to move forward, and probably to move forward while bond prices are still pretty decent. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to move forward.
That is true. If you look at the kind of the projected interest rate that's there, I mean, it's a little bit, there's quite a bit of fluff in there. I mean, I think we're going to come in lower than that, but who knows what next few months could be.
Thank you, Trustee Meyer. We're going to keep you up here all night. Trustee Meyer.
No. Let me be sure, in the letter that you wrote to us, it said the commission's allocated 50,000 specifically for planning pre-design release. And so delaying a month is not going to put at risk that
Judy, that allocation was actually made a year ago.
Is what?
That was made a year ago.
we've tested it pretty well then, it's still
We
there.
actually allocated that in the May meeting a year ago so that the students would have funds available to start doing some preliminary work.
Okay, so thank you. So obviously, one of the things is we don't want to lose ground on either missing out on this opportunity for the funding or having it change in any way other than one more month of gaining interest to share it with us. Okay.
Right. Mr. Banducci?
I guess I'm going to add my 2 cents to the discussion after listening to the inputs from the trustees and some things that Ron and Ken said in particular resonated with me because I had made some notes. And I guess just a couple observations. And I think this will maybe reinforce the rationale that Ken stated as to why maybe it makes sense to not try to consolidate the 2 readings. One of the things that came up just recently, and it's one of several things I noted, but in the newspaper there was an editorial, and people are always watching how we spend our money. And there was a question about, hey, we got a new car on campus. How do we buy that? How was it sourced? You know, and so I had some communications with President Dunlap about the process and how we end up with a new car and where did we go out and who got a chance to bid on that and was that an efficient purchase? But people are watching. They want to know how we spend our money. And the young man, I'm assuming young man, said, hey, I'm paying this much, and you guys went out and just bought this really nice new car. How much of my tuition money did that take, and how much of my tuition going up because of that? So we just have to be so sensitive. Although it appears unrelated, I could relate them. We just changed sports leagues to save money. Why? Because we were supposedly losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, that impacts the price of tuition. Okay, well, if we're getting rid of changing our sports leagues to save money, but yet we're proposing a tuition increase to fund another facility. So we're academic, so maybe we shouldn't have sports, some people will say. But what is our role in academic and CTE versus social or wellness or activity? Should we be focused just on books and classroom space? It's additional debt that's being taken out by the college on the backs of, student fees and tuition. And you always will come back with, well, how many students were polled? Well, maybe they reached out to the CTE guys from Richard and the gang. But Ron's got a valid point. You may have a lot of kids that show up at this new campus out there that never circle back to here. And, do the Bonners, people are paying for the sub already. They may not be too jazzed about that if you're in Bonners Ferry or Sandpoint or Kellogg or online. So these are all considerations, and maybe we'll hear some of these voices in the next month as people see the fact that it's going to be an additional burden to come to this college. And at what point is there a sensitivity to that? Where do we put the price point? And so I think of those different considerations and some of the inputs and some of the things that are out there, and I think they all interconnect. At any time we're spending money, and particularly when we're raising tuition to spend money, that we do have to take a very long view of it, 10,000-foot view, and we need to just very cautiously move through that process. So.
Thank you. Certainly, I'll get right to you. So, Board, if there's nothing more for Mr. Armand, there is. Trustee Meyer?
Only as we ponder this and we hear from other folks, what's wrong with delaying it a month? What implications does that have? Are there any ripples we haven't thought of that we should be, disappointment, impatience, but are there any other alligators out there that we haven't realized? We may gain not only more ideas, not necessarily discouragement, but more ideas on how to make it work. So the question was, and maybe other folks will speak to it. Is
Well,
there
I think
anything wrong with
Mr.
doing this?
Armand
I'll
has
just
already
answer to
said.
that. We serve as a Dormitory Housing Commission to work in conjunction with the Board of Trustees. It's an appointed position to work in conjunction with this campus for the betterment of the campus. We're here to work with you. We're not trying to push something through. This is not an agenda item that we have great buy-in to. We look at it, we have to make sure that we have a great understanding of the financial implications. That's what matters to us. We're going to take on the bonding, we're going to take on the debt service, we're going to have to understand the cash flow. The financial side of it's what we're really concerned about. we're satisfied with that. You know, that's the part that we have to be satisfied with. When I look at the numbers, I mean, I can sit here and look at the spreadsheet and come up with a pretty real understanding of where the Dormitory Housing Commission is going to be tomorrow, 2010, or 15, 2022, or whatever. The financials is what we're looking for. The process is what you have to do. In our charge is to work with you to make things happen in conjunction, you know, and that's why I'm here tonight. I mean, it's not like I'm here lobbying for, you know, tonight by any means, but I mean, it was proposed that we skip the first reading or second reading. I mean, if that's the choice, so be it. We set a meeting in April to move forward. We can change that. That's not a problem. So.
Okay, very good. Mr. Nielsen.
And make sure you take it back to your board, is that, first of all, we all understand the value of this for the students. We understand this is a great attraction tool for bringing more students here. We understand that it's no burden to the taxpayers. We understand all the positive side of that, but just in an effort to just say is let's go through the due process and allow the time and not feel like we moved off, get some public input, and for us to be able to feel comfortable, okay, we are now forced to make a $14 million decision. Maybe nothing, if today you make it, you say, well, I'd do this, it probably is not going to change between now and then, but 30 days is an appropriate time to say that you really did your due diligence. So to make sure that they
Ron,
don't.
I understand that. I mean, like I say, I'm not here advocating one way or another. I'm just here as a representative for the Dormitory Housing Commission saying, if you've got questions, I'm here to answer them. Financially, we understand how this works really, really well. Policy-wise, it's up to you guys.
Thank you for that, Mr. Arman.
Okay.
All right, thank you. And then Richard, before John completes his presentation, you asked to speak to us?
Yes, that is correct. There's just a few things that I want to kind of frame some ideas here. And listening to the conversation being held, and I'm coming to you with utmost humility and respect for the board, and I want that to be known. The conversation about getting input from the community, I think, is a valid one, and that's something that we did do, and we went out and we asked the community what they felt about a recreation center in context with maybe it being a competitive issue or some things of that nature. But when we're dealing with the students' money, I don't know where the community, and I say this once again in very much respect, how we don't go to the community and tell them how to spend their money. I don't know why we would ask the community to tell us how to spend our money. This is completely driven by the students, 100% owned by the students. And I think that we need to frame our thought based off that. Some other things and issues that I overheard was that fees, there are potentially some students that will not utilize this but will still have to pay the fee. That is something that is very understood. But in order to institutionalize this fee, all students have to pay the fee, from my understanding. There are multiple fees that students pay that do not utilize. And one of those, athletics. Yes, the sub that we're sitting in here right now. Please don't let that stop us from moving forward and providing a great opportunity for the students to have this rec center. The other thing is Judy Meyer, you mentioned that there are potential things that we need to look forward to in the future as far as expansion. From my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, I do not know of another student-driven facility that was proposed over the last 10 years, other than the Student Recreation Center. There's been mention of a dormitory, increasing dorms, off and on, but once again, don't let that interrupt us from moving forward with this Student Recreation Center. I'm very much in love with North Idaho College and the opportunities that it has provided us. So I'm only making these statements and these comments based off of my servant leadership to the students. And let that just be said. If you have any questions.
Just a comment for me is that, first of all, the taxpayers own the ground on which this is going to be built, so they do have a say-so. Second of all is we're putting the burden of responsibility to collect this money on the college, And one of the things that we're concerned about is we've raised tuition rates, which we don't know what the negative effect is. And we've been very lucky and blessed that our fees are less than the other colleges. But as we continue to bump this up to balance our budget and to cut for the shortfall of enrollment, which we've had 3 years consecutive of this, that now we're looking at saying that we're going to put an additional financial burden. What does this mean to the college? So those are all taxpayer issues, because the taxpayers in this community pay 33% of the cost of education. So yes, they do have a position on those 3 points.
Trustee Meyer,
I think
did
it
you
was-
have
I
a
think it was
comment?
me.
Oh, Trustee Banducci.
Thank you. Actually, what I'm going to say is going to just dovetail a little bit on what Ron said, kind of the thought process. When you talked about the students kind of carrying the water here, if I'm a student and I'm paying all my own tuition, then that would be an accurate statement. However, if I'm getting any federal money indirectly, the taxpayers are still supporting that also. And I would suggest to you the taxpayers that could be referenced directly would be all the parents that are paying money. I suspect there's a significant percentage of the students here that are getting some financial help from their parents. So that's still a representation of the taxpayers. And I don't know how many parents were polled to say, we're going to raise student tuition more so your kid can lift weights. I mean, that's maybe not a great example, but some may really support that. Some may go, oh, I can't afford anymore, or I don't want that. So there is a public voice there, I think. I think that's all Mr. Nilsson and I are pointing out. And I think it's a fair position for them to have.
Thank you. Trustee Howard?
I guess my comment is, don't be discouraged by this conversation. This is not about defeating this proposal. That's not what it's about at all. I haven't heard that at all tonight. It's about affording the process that we've set up, a first and second reading to go forward in order to open up the discussion and allow people to have input. That's what this conversation is about. You've made a good presentation here. The last 3 times, I guess, or 2 times I've heard it. And this really is more about the process right now than it is about addressing whether this is going to go forward or not. We'll do that the next time around. And the other point that I wanted to make is, to some extent, going to the second reading, if we go to the second reading and we don't see a groundswell of opposition from anybody, that reinforces your position. That makes your position even stronger about how well people want this, because they haven't come forward to object to it. So, I quite frankly, I'd be surprised if we see a groundswell, but we might. But it affords people the opportunity to do that, and that's all we're doing.
And Trustee Meyer, did you?
Similar theme. I fully expect this to go forward, and we've asked now. We haven't heard of anything. The affirmation that occurs by a second reading saying everybody's had a chance, we're in it for real forever, I only think strengthens the position, and I look forward to the next meeting when we can do that.
And I'd just like to add, Richard, I appreciate your passion, and you've worked really hard on behalf of your student body, and I agree with the fellow trustees on the position. We need to be respectful of the process. I also agree with the comments that don't look at this as a defeat, it's a process, and we'll get through the process. Go ahead.
No, I'd just like to say thank you. It's an educational process, what this is, very democratic, and I appreciate that. And shared governance, this is the beauty of shared governance that we see right now. So I thank you for that opportunity, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say what I said, so.
That's right. Good for you. John, you wanted to wrap up your presentation? I think you can see the writing on the wall that we would like to go through our formal process, but we certainly want to listen to your fantastic ending.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair and trustees and all my friends that are hanging in there. All I have to say at this point is what we put on the table was an ask, and it's become very obvious that that is not the desire of the board. And I just want to reinforce what Mick said, in that if we have to wait 30 days to finish a 12-year fight for what we believe is the best thing we can do for this college, then we'll do so. And I appreciate all of your time tonight and your consideration, and we will gladly be here next month and in between now and then to answer any questions and continue this process. We are more than dedicated to it, and thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, I might make a comment.
Please.
Madam Chair. Next meeting's going to be in Sandpoint.
Then harder.
I love Sandpoint.
Well, this year.
Yeah,
We
on the
do too.
22nd. Yeah, that's right.
Well, we've got some bands headed up there. All right. Thank you, board. Anything further on this topic?
I have a curiosity question, if I may.
Certainly.
And this could be either to Mick or John. With the, and there's no right or wrong answer, but Ron may appreciate the question because he's kind of got an itch for consultants. Of the $50,000 that you've allocated, how much of that have you guys needed to spend so far to do this process? Because a lot of it's been in-house work, so I was kind of curious. Seems like you've been pretty efficient with it.
To this point, according to Steve, who's been the steward of those funds, we've spent $12,000.
Good job.
Thank you.
All right, board. We are moving on from this topic. Thank you so much for your presentation, and we will speak to you next month. Back to my agenda. That takes us to tab 2, second reading, revised political activities policy 3.02.11. Mark Browning.
Madam Chair, members of the board, pleasure to be here with you tonight for a second reading. As detailed in our last reading of the policy, it is properly before you. There's been no revisions between first and second reading. I'd be happy to stand for any questions you might have before you vote.
Trustees, questions? Mr. Nielsen.
To the best of your knowledge, Mark, how many times has this college been in a position where a North Idaho employee was elected to the state legislature and then we have to go through this process?
Madam Chair and Trustee Nielsen, to my knowledge, it's not been a widely used policy. I don't have personal knowledge or history that there's been a person, but at some point, there must have at least been a concern raised sufficient to draft a procedure and a policy to somebody's concern at some point in history.
Follow up to this, that and I remember we had a little bit of discussion regarding this, is anytime I see the word where the board has a line going through that means that you're taking the due process that was in place and we take that board out of there. My recommendation would be is I have no problem with everything in this where it says determined by the college president in consultation with the employee supervisors and the president of cabinets and then approved by the board. I still believe that I would like to see that board final approval. No difference in what we do with tenure, which we do every year, but I don't want to remove the word board from that process.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. I didn't hear that as a motion, so Mr. Howard would go forward with his question. And then if you have a motion, I'll certainly come back to that.
And that's what I'm going to do, is make a motion that we approve the policy, the proposed policy 3.02.11 as presented. Then we can make an amendment to it if it calls for it.
Do I have a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
All right, I have a second. Discussion?
Now, Ron, if you wanted to make an amendment to that.
Yeah, I would propose, and you can't help me with this, all I want to do is just leave it as it is presented, and where the word determined by the board, now it's been determined by the college president in consultation with the employees and supervisors, and then final approval in front of the board. All I want to do is to leave the board in the process, a part of the approval process, since this is a very specific modification to this, and it's never been used before, and I'm sure we don't want to bother the board as far as I look at it. If this happens where an employee decides to go in the state legislature and we have to grant them whatever, no difference in tenure, which would take us 2 or 3 minutes if we don't see any issue, but I don't want to take the word with the final approval by the board off there, so.
Mr. Nielsen, would you I'll get
sorry.
right back to you.
Yes.
Would you consider in your proposal, it wouldn't make sense for the board to work directly with the employee supervisor.
No.
I would suggest the board work directly with the college president.
And Madam Chair, that's exactly what I'm saying, is I like the way it's written, that just after it's gone through due process, and that Joe's and his staff and the people have done that, just come in here for final approval,
But we would need to change the wording. We would leave the president in,
right?
but we would
But
remove the board working with the employee supervisor, because that wouldn't
Exactly.
be appropriate.
And then put a final approval by the board on the end. So if you can turn that into a motion, that was what I'd
Well,
like
let
to see.
me get to Mr. Banducci and come right back to you. Todd?
You know what? I think Ken's ready. Go for it, Ken. Tell us what you got there, buddy.
Mr. Howard?
Well, I just have a proposal. It would read like this. Look at the last two lines. Determined by the college president in consultation with the employee supervisor and supervising member of the president's cabinet, and approved by the board on an individual basis.
That gets it there.
Seconded.
I mean, that's just like a sabbatical, same thing we look at too, same idea.
All right. So the final approval is with the board, is what you're saying, but the process is with the president and supervisor.
Correct.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Madam Chair, if I
Mr.
might
Browning.
just point out, you have two separate issues at play here in that
Okay.
paragraph. The first complete sentence is a complete and separate action and responsibility from the second. Madam Chair, if you'll allow me to read, North Idaho College employees who are elected to the state legislature will be granted a leave of absence without pay from the day before the opening of the regular session or special session of the legislature to the day after the close of the session. That is one complete contained action. That's not,
So it's a done deal.
that's a done deal.
Okay.
What you have in front of you and what you're talking about is a process to address employees who are elected to a part-time municipal or county office, part-time only. That's what you're talking, just to make sure that you're not talking about an employee that's elected to the legislature. These are only part-time and municipal offices that are in question.
For instance, city council.
That'd be a good example.
Or you could be a county commissioner. Well, that's not
No, that's
considered
a full-time
part-time, so,
position.
yeah.
Okay.
Chair, sorry.
Mr. Howard?
Well, I appreciate you pointing that out. We talked about that the last time around, that
We did.
really those should be two different paragraphs. It'd probably show up a little bit better, but I don't know that changes the motion and the amendment to the motion.
Just
with
for your
regard to those
understanding.
part-time.
There'd been a reference to the legislature. I just want to make sure that as a board, you understood that if an employee is elected to the legislature, you grant them leave unpaid and they're on their way.
Thank you for that. All right, we have a motion and a second. Do you want to read your motion one more time?
Well, the motion is to approve it, but the amendment, and I don't know if there was a second to it. Was
There was.
Was there? Okay.
Right here.
Then we got to vote on the amendment.
Can you read the amendment again?
Yeah, the amendment is to change the last sentence of the third paragraph to read supervisor and supervising member of President's cabinet and approved by the board on an individual basis.
Okay.
That's the amendment.
All right. Board, do I have all in favor for the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carried.
Now we vote on
Now we vote on the, walk me through this again.
on the motion,
Just a
We'll vote on the
amended
motion.
motion.
Oh, okay, I'm with you. Mr. Banducci?
a question, or I almost would say point of order. It was mentioned that maybe for clarification, Mark kind of opened this can slightly, and it's okay, it's a good can, that maybe paragraph 3 should be paragraph 3 and 4, and separate those two so that they are independent thoughts, if you will. Would that take an amendment to do that?
I don't think so, but it would be good housekeeping. So would you consider?
Madam Chair, I'm sure it's fine, because as this will now be run back through the process through Senate and Faculty Assembly, the wordsmiths will get another crack at it. They may have more suggestions for you before it comes back yet again.
Okay. So now I'd like to take a vote on the motion itself. All in favor?
Aye.
The amended motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Board. Mr. Browning, when you do take this back, I think it's important that it's framed correctly. The Board supports our employees certainly filling in for these community positions and even state positions, and I would think we would strongly encourage that. Just this particular policy, how it was written, we wanted to do a little bit of amendment. But by all means, we want them filling in these wonderful public offices. Thank you.
You think a quick 5-minute break for everybody? I just saw Chairman, Trustee Nielsen had the, we've been here 2.5 hours.
Well, we could all just leave and he won't know what happened.
Ooh.
All right, yes, there's been a request for a 5-minute break. We'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Back from the break, everyone. We will continue on with our agenda, but first, Board, I'd like to entertain a motion to amend our agenda. Something has come up we'd like to discuss about in executive session or personnel. If I could have a motion to go in exec right after this meeting, amend the agenda first, and then we'll make a motion. Do I have a motion on that?
I want to be sure what we're motioning here is to go.
To go
have an
into
executive
exec. Yeah, to amend the agenda, excuse me.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
If I could, if we're going to amend the agenda during the meeting, we have to come up
Reason.
with a good faith reason why, and that may be that there's something new that has come up that we didn't anticipate, and we're amending the agenda to add an executive session at the end to discuss a personnel issue that has just come to the board's attention.
May I have a motion to amend the agenda?
Well, is this a motion to go into executive session at the close of the meeting?
To amend the agenda to add
allow
an
us to.
executive session.
I think it's to
Is
add,
that an amendment to the agenda just to go into executive session?
there is no executive session that has been posted on the agenda.
So we don't have an official one, so now we're putting one in.
I move that we amend the agenda to add an executive session at the close of the general session.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Now, Board, we've amended the agenda, and we will go into,
We didn't vote.
we need a vote. Thank you. May I have all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion approved. The agenda is amended. All right, that takes us on to second reading, tab 3. Eliminate payroll advance policy 3.02.27, Chris Martin.
Madam Chair, trustees, I am here requesting on the second reading the elimination of the payroll advance policy, and if there are any questions, I will stand for those.
Board, any questions of Chris Martin? If hearing none, Trustee Meyer?
No question. I was about to make the motion.
Thank you.
Is this the time to do it?
Do.
I move that we eliminate policy 3.02.27, referring to payroll advances.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Martin. And that takes us to tab 4, second reading, eliminate memorials policy 6.06.01.
Madam Chair, trustees, I'm here tonight on the second reading requesting the elimination of the memorials policy.
I put a motion that we eliminate the policy 6.06-01, elimination of this memorials policy.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Man, did he get off easy.
That takes us to tab 5, second reading, eliminate information for transfer student policy 5.04.06. Dr. Leah Burns.
Chairwoman Woods and trustee members, I'm here to offer the request the second reading and approval of the elimination of the transfer students policy. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Board, any questions for Dr. Burns? Trustee Meyer.
Question on the discussion topic, you said this, I think the information is the State Board of Education reviewed the revisions, and they'll review them for a second time during their April meeting. And if I read that correctly, then how do we know what they're going to be doing? And therefore, will that affect us?
Chairman Wood and Trustee Meyer, the proposed policy at the State Board of Education,
I'm having trouble hearing you, Lynn.
the proposed policy that went before the State Board of Education for the first reading there was really no question or concerns about it, so it is my belief that it will pass without a question. Just the due process, as you have enacted tonight, they wanted to take it to the second reading, but other than that, there was really no issue with it. No questions sent back to the board staff in regards to that. So I really am very, very confident it's going to pass without question. Eliminating this policy actually puts us more in alignment with the board policy that's moving forward, because this policy would actually have conflicted with the one that I anticipate is going to be passed. Any other questions?
Any further questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Motion to eliminate policy 5.0406, information and transfer students.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Burns. That takes us to new business under tab 6, approve our Head Start grant. Welcome, Beth Ann Fuller.
It's an endurance contest.
Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Dunlap, members of President's Cabinet, and guests, thank you for allowing me to present our, for approval, the application for federal financial assistance to operate a Head Start program with the comprehensive description of our organization's plans to deliver quality Head Start services and a detailed budget to support the planned service of delivery. And so I would like to visit about the goals and objectives that are in your board packet. And tonight I gave you a little bit of a revised version of that. There were just a few changes in terms of the 5-year plan that we would like to submit, including all of the strategies, the data tools, and the measurement outcomes that we would like to include in being able to reach our goals. So in that colored version of the, which gives us our NIC mission and our North Idaho College Head Start mission, then our 4 main goals, and then our strategies and measurable outcomes. There are just a few pieces that I'd like to point out. In our mission that coincides nicely with the college's mission, NIC Head Start's a school readiness program that provides education and support for young children and their families. That would include mostly limited income families and other families that make it into the program based on some specific eligibility criteria, such as being homeless or foster placement. So this has been a great opportunity for us to put in a program goals for the next 5 years, which means we've been invited into a non-competitive 5-year cycle. So that is what is unique from any of our other types of proposals, because they have always been year to year. So we're excited about that, and also that our goals were supposed to be far-reaching, innovative, and creative, which is something we're not used to being asked to do. We're usually quite finite and very concrete. So our program goals basically are that we really want to enhance our professional development system so that we can inspire our staff to be lifelong learners. We would also like to support parents and guardians in promoting the health and well-being of their families through some new initiatives in health and nutrition education, and that will support their growth, learning, and development. We'd also like to help our families make some community connections toward enhanced parenting, career, and life goals. And then the program would like to establish supports for children, families, and staff to create nurturing and responsive relationships, high-quality learning environments for optimal school readiness. So we made these as far-reaching as we could so that the objectives that we came up with would fit within that. And then as we move forward, there's an opportunity each year not to change the goals, but
but to change possibly the strategies or to add strategies as we move forward and see how we do on each of these goals. The only other piece of that I'd like to highlight also is that in those strategies, in the data tools and measurement outcomes, we either list the data tools we'll use to be able to track this progress or the actual outcome we would like to see, like percentage increase. So that would be our 5-year goal plan that goes along with our budget. And if you don't mind me moving into the budget, our North Idaho College Head Start 2015-16 budget is a 2-page document here that explains that we are flat funded this year. So at the very top of our budget, in the packet I gave you tonight that looks like that, the funding description shows our federal grant. It has not changed in terms of the budgeted amount. In looking at the columns of last year in comparison to this year, the things that stick out are our training and technical assistance amount stayed the same, so that was not decreased. We did not receive a cost of living increase this year. We did last year, so that would be where there is no increase there. Our state TANF funding has stayed the same, and that's something that the legislature has been very supportive of, making sure that TANF funding is maintained for our program to be able to serve 13 additional children above our 280 actually that we do through our federal grant. And then for the other funding, we have a Harding Family Center rental income that we're projecting. CACFP, which is Child and Adult Care Feeding Program, those are our meal reimbursements, and for a total operating budget of around $2,600,000. So moving into personnel, you might see a slight decrease in the personnel amount, a slight increase in the fringe, and the increase in the fringe there is our projection of increases in insurance cost and a few of the minor changes in staffing based on our proposal for the allocated services that we want to provide. Then moving down into contractual, there are a few changes in terms of looking at some of the outsourcing and contracting for some of our major component services, including health services, that there was a slight change in that area. Down to another change would be in children's services under North Idaho College Children's Center, and that would be an increase of almost $10,000, but what that increase is an increase in the number of children that we would serve at the North Idaho College Children's Center. So that slot would be shifted from another county, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So we would be able to go from 10 Head Start families that are NIC students to 12. Then on page 2 as well, you might see that under occupancy, our Harding Center mortgage has been zeroed out because the building has been paid for and is now has full federal interest. And coming on down to accounting services, I would just like to point out that through looking at many ways that we can look at our budget and do staffing, we were able to put in an additional amount of money. Our last year's amount for payroll accounting services to North Idaho College was $32,300, and we are proposing an increase in that to support the services that the college provides to our grant to up to $68,160 there. So those are the major changes to the actual grant from last year to this year and any of those line items. Are there any questions about that before I move into kind of where we're proposing to move our slots?
Yes, Mr. Nielsen.
Just some clarification on accounting services. What that is not an additional of a person, it's just sharing some of the overhead costs for the college. This $36,000 increase on that line is what, that you get an allocation from the college? Is that what that is? Or is that an additional head count?
So our grant, for being our grantee, the college has the opportunity to look at what that costs in either a direct cost to our program or in an indirect cost to our program. And so analyzing what kind of support services that the college in general offers to our program, this is a reflection of our grant paying for the burden of those services on the college.
Okay, so again, it's not an additional head count, it's just
Right.
sharing some of the burden.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Appreciate that.
Go right ahead.
So if you wouldn't mind looking at your board packet in terms of the document that says allocation of enrollment slots in the target area. I'd just like to highlight just a few changes there. Currently, our Harding Head Start and Preschool Center in Coeur d'Alene operates in our Harding Family Center only. Our proposal is in a collaboration with School District Number 271. They are offering an opportunity for us to serve families that live in the Hayden area in a north site that will be supported by the school district in what is currently being slated to be at Hayden Meadows Elementary. And what we're hoping with that is that our children that live north will not have such a burden on transportation to make it clear down south to our Harding Center. And then we'll also be more reflective of our children with disabilities having a bus route that isn't so long from the school district. We would follow the pattern of the school district's boundaries for where children would go the following year. So the school district boundaries would dictate those slots. So in that mix, we have currently been serving 77 children at Harding. We're proposing taking 3 slots from our boundary county, Julian Boucher Center, and moving those into Kootenai County. And looking at our community assessment, we're looking at the demographics and the shrinking populations in both Shoshone, Benawa, and Boundary counties, and looking at the majority of the wait-listed children we have. There are 415 children currently on our wait list after we're completely full, and most of those are in Kootenai County. So looking at that opportunity to shift just slots for this next year and be serving more children in Kootenai County. The Post Falls Center would stay the same with 60. The Lakeland Center in Rathdrum would stay the same with 40 slots for children. Bonner County is one of the is also an inclusion program. So we have a collaboration with the school district there, number 84, and we have a center-based option there in terms of children receiving 4 days of week of school there in an inclusion program, and that would stay the same. I just might add that the collaboration with Harding, that stays what we call combination program. They go 3 days a week instead of 4. They get 8 home visits. They get 4 from the teacher and 4 from their family advocate. So in the center base, like Post Falls, Lakeland, and Sandpoint, they get 4 days a week of school and 5 visits total. 2 home visits from a teacher with 2 parent conferences and 3 visits from their family advocate. So, you know, the less class time is compensated for by having home visits and working on home teaching. So Bonner, Boundary, and Benawa, coming to those, we currently already have 17 children in Benawa. So at our St. Mary's Center, that stays the same in terms of slots. It seems to be a perfect number of children for that program. If we keep getting shrinking demographics, one of these centers may someday not have enough children to fill for a whole classroom. But right now we're able to solidly fill those classrooms. And then lastly, Shoshone County, we are proposing taking their classroom down from 19 currently to 17 for those same specific reasons of not having a long wait list and also seeing shrinking demographics, and moving those to the Children's Center where we can serve those additional 2 children. So that's our basically we're proposing to stay within all 5 northern counties. We don't have a proposal to stop serving any of the 5 northern counties. And that is also just the allocation of our enrollment slots for those target areas. Are there any questions about that?
Board, any questions about the boundaries? Trustee Meyer.
Question on the enrollment count. It looks like you're adapting because of the reduction in population in some of the counties. But I think I heard you say that there's still, and I'm not sure where this was, a 415 wait list count for the 5 northern counties. So although we're choosing to reduce some because there's shrinking population, there's still a need in those counties as well as Kootenai, where you're suggesting there's more growth, more need.
Right. So we're allotted the 293 slots unless there was an opportunity to expand, which there isn't currently. So we're being offered a slot number of 293. So within that, we're proposing that slight shift of some of those slots to be shifted to Kootenai County so that we can just serve more where we have a much higher wait list. The wait lists at our smaller centers and our one classroom centers are they fill, but they're small wait lists.
And I think maybe what you've done is highlight what clearly as a society we're beginning to understand, and that is the value of early childhood education. And yet we don't have the funding to go with that yet. And in fact, we're not able to attend, not even to half, 290 out of, and still 400 people waiting. So more people are waiting than we're taking care of. More families are waiting than we're taking care of. So I think I understand what you're doing. It's just frustrating. I'm delighted that we as an NIC can help make that happen. I'm just sorry that we can't do more, which is you get to do more. So keep crusading.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Howard.
I didn't have a question about the allocation. I guess I had a question more about, you're asking us this evening to approve the grant application, and you also have down here approve the 5-year goals. Are those 2 separate? I know there are documents to support that, but do you need 2 separate approvals?
No, not really. It's just the 5-year goals are an important piece of our direction, so they're part of the application. So included in the application, we have to submit our 5-year goals and our budget and our justifications of where we want to serve and why. So those are just the major pieces of the actual application.
So if we approved the grant application for the program year July 1 through June 30th, that would cover everything?
Yes.
Okay.
Do I have a motion, Mr. Howard? Discussion? Yes,
Well, I
Mr.
have 2
Benji.
questions.
Go ahead.
Real quick.
You bet.
Beth Ann, I'm sorry, it's late, and I'm going to ask
That's okay.
questions. One is I'd looked at what was in the board package, and then I'm looking at what you gave us, and I noticed that there's a couple small changes in the goals, and then one of the goals that was under number 4 has been eliminated, and it was the first one. And it caught my attention because I thought it was interesting. It says, incorporate trauma-informed care into all program services. Is that to make us aware so when the kids whack their head, or something?
I love that you asked that question. Trauma-informed care is a philosophy of looking at some of the crisis people, especially children, adverse childhood experiences, different type of crisis situations people have had. PTSD is a great example. It's just being culturally aware of where people are coming from and what they've been through and how we support them and how we react. Remembering that when we're trying to help somebody, if they are in a fight or flight type of a mode in their brain, it's not the best time to try to set goals and move forward with something. But just health and welfare uses trauma-informed care in terms of how they try to keep a family unified if there's been a child abuse allegation or concern, that this gives us an opportunity to just kind of to come alongside health and welfare with some of our foster children and provide that kind of understanding of what some families may have been through and to be able to just relate to them. And
that sounds
to tell you
great.
why we didn't really eliminate it, we just went ahead and put it in our professional development plan.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, and I was wondering maybe
Yeah,
due
so
to
we
lack
just-
of time and resources, if maybe that had to be something that had to be reprioritized, and although it's a nice concept and additional good training, that maybe it had to take a backseat to something else. So I was just
It
curious.
worked better to fit it within the increase in our interagency agreements, because in our interagency agreement with health and welfare, we do mention that we do have a biannual training, and so when we get together with them, that's going to be the focus of that training. So we just tweaked it a little, but thank you.
Well, I'm looking at it anyway, and I have one more question. Now, we have 4 program goals, and you've aligned the mission statement with ours, and then we have 3, 1.1 to 1.3, 2.1, 2.2, 3.1, 3.2, 4.1, 4.2 so some bullet points for each of the 4 goals. Now, as I look at the breakout of those, then, it looks to me like you've got a goal year, and then what objective is in that goal year, and then a discussion of that objective, if I'm seeing that correctly. Now, on a couple of these, I see 1.1, I see 1.2, I see 1.3, that makes sense to me. I see 2.1, 2.2, but then I see a 2.3, and then I saw a couple others, a 2.2A, a 2.2B. I can relate to those. I think I can make sense of that. And then I had a couple others in the back, though, a 2.4, a 2.6. Were there some other objectives that I'm missing, or are those, how are those connected exactly?
So following across, so we figured like what was the major focus in goal year 1 is when we're going to accomplish something. And the next net or 1 to 5 or 2 and 3 or whatever years we think are going to be the major focus for those objectives. And then the objectives actually they follow under the program goal objective 1, and then any strategies that correlate to that objective 1, and then we would go to like objective 2 and any strategies that correlate to objective 2, and then if there's an A or a B, it's because it's really not a separate strategy, it's just another step of that strategy. Does that help?
It does, but it looks to me like maybe I have some additional objectives that I just don't see. Like, there's one that says objective 2.6.
You're right, and thank you for catching that, because that should really be 2.5, I would think, yes. So we'll fix that.
Okay, then where would my 2.5?
We probably got rid of 1 and then didn't change the 2.6 at the end there.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries. I just see a 2.1 and 2.2 in the green, and I was
Yeah.
trying to line them up, and I was a little confused. Okay.
Thank you. Board, is there a motion? Oh, Mr. Nielsen.
No, I was going to, in an effort to get going, the motion to approve the Head Start application from 2015, 2016.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Third.
Third and a fourth and a
Fourth it?
fifth. And Board, all in favor? Or
Aye.
continued support? Aye. Beth Ann, motion carries, and as Ms. Meyer already mentioned, continue your crusade. Wish we could do more. You've just done an incredible job with what you have to work with.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Board, that takes us now to first reading, revised instructor initiated withdrawals policy 5.04.02. Dr. Burns.
Chairman Wood, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to present this policy for first read this evening. This is the instructor initiated withdrawal policy 5.04.02, And the policy basically provides some parameters for faculty, instructors, to be able to initiate with the withdrawal of a student from a course. The faculty would enact this policy if they felt it was in the best interest of the student's learning and or possibly of the other students in the classroom, the learning environment, basically. The important thing to note here is that this policy is not intended to interfere with the policies and procedures that we have related to student conduct. So this policy really is not about student conduct. It's often about other factors that may interfere with student learning. So with that as the basis for this, I would like to just kind of give you some background to this policy. And certainly it has been brought up this evening that there has been a fair amount of controversy over this policy in terms of bringing it forward. The policy actually has existed for quite some time, 2002, 2003, I think the original policy was written. It was revised in 2010, sort of in alignment with some changes that occurred to the attendance policy on this campus. And now bringing it before you tonight, the primary changes to the policy really are in wording, not necessarily at all in intent. And one of the concerns that was raised, and let me approach it from this manner, one of the concerns that was raised as we started having conversations with representatives from student services about this policy was that there was a concern that this policy as it is written may provide too much authority to faculty in relation to removing students. And as Richard noted, that maybe it's students who should be responsible for their own actions and behavior in the classrooms and either choose to remain in the classroom or choose to withdraw themselves or suffer the consequences of not withdrawing, which usually means the grade ends in an F or a failure for it. When I look at that question or that opposition to this policy, what I would have to offer to you is that, first of all, this policy is used very rarely on this campus. My conversations with people from the registrar's office is that, it is maybe once or twice a semester that this policy has ever been used. And primarily when the policy has been used, it has been used after there has been some sort of a catastrophic event that has occurred in the student's life where there has been, and as a result of that event, there has been conversation between a faculty member and the student, and together they decide it's in the best interest of the student to be withdrawn from the class. The faculty initiates the withdrawal just more or less on behalf of the student, so the student doesn't have to get online, log on, or come to the institution at all to withdraw themselves from the class. In addition, I would offer you another example of why I believe this policy has not been abused in any way by faculty members, is that in my 2.5 years as Vice President for Instruction, I have not had any appeals, nor am I aware of any student appeals related to this policy. What that tells me is that when the policy has been used, there has been no objection or no objection raised by students who have been withdrawn from these courses by the faculty. So I also would point out that we made sure that we left in the policy that it stated both in the policy and the procedure that withdrawals under this policy are separate from those covered as disciplinary violations of the student code of conduct. The other situation that might arise where a faculty would use this policy is if a course is designed deliberately to have a lot of student interaction and engagement with each other in order for student learning to occur. And there might be a student who, for whatever reason, just chooses not to participate. They're not acting out in the classroom. They're not in any way causing a disruption in the classroom other than they're not participating. And that might be just from sitting in the classroom and not engaging, or simply by missing a tremendous amount of class. When the course is designed for group participation and each student is responsible for participating for learning of the whole to occur, when you have somebody who's not participating in that way, it interferes with the learning of others. Certainly faculty would start with engaging with that student and inviting them to participate. And I think that would occur more than once. And should that not happen, and it truly is interfering with the learning of others, the faculty then would probably choose to take it upon themselves to withdraw the student from that course after they've come to the conclusion that the student really is not there to learn and to be a part of the class. But I think that that is a part of what the concern was by students and some of the staff in student services. I did have the opportunity, so the other part of concern was really related to the procedure, which you don't have in front of you. And my understanding is that the policy went before the Senate probably in the December meeting and the January meeting, and the policy was approved. However, there was concerns about the procedure. The procedure came back to Senate in February, and it was actually tabled because of the concerns raised by a student who was present during the discussion on the procedure. And then just last week came back to Senate. The procedure came back to Senate as well. I was in attendance in the Senate meeting and sort of explained the procedure. The procedure was passed by the Senate. But because of the concerns of the students, I had the opportunity actually to attend the ASNC leadership, their ASNC Senate, is that correct? ASNC executive session, let me get the terminology correct, and talk to them as they were considering the resolution that was presented here this evening. We had a very good discussion. I had the opportunity to explain to them the intent of the policy and then the process used to develop the procedure. During our discussion, I felt like, one, we came to some consensus on the policy as it was written, and based on the vote, which was not a unanimous vote, but based on the vote of the students, the resolution did not move forward, which basically meant they supported the policy. However, there was a certain amount of concern expressed about the procedure. As stated by Richard earlier, I offered to come back because we can bring the procedure back, discuss the procedure, and then take it back to Senate and have the Senate reapprove the procedure with any changes that we might make. And it really was, the concerns were really related into, one, how the students were notified, and secondly, the amount of time that was being provided for students to contact the faculty after they had been notified that the faculty was considering withdrawing them from the class. So want to make sure that we have that in a manner that the students believe that students, one, could comply with and would have the opportunity to voice their objection to being withdrawn from a class and have a conversation with a faculty member. So I am ready to go back to and work with the students on that and make sure we get the procedure so that it works for both parties, both the faculty and the students. And then lastly, I would share with you, because I think it's important to disclose, all of this to you, is that there really were some concerns about about the process used to get this particular policy from initial revisions through the Senate process and before you as the Board of Trustees. I have a wonderful job that every single day presents me a learning opportunity. And certainly when I was meeting with the students yesterday, I learned some things about how that process didn't work and how in the future we can make the process work better. So what I offer to the students, that when I have a policy that is so directly related to students as this one was, I will start where I ended with yesterday, actually start meeting with the student government leadership and make sure that I have their input from the beginning. I think it would make things go more smoothly. And so I'm committed to doing that in the future. So I think I covered all the important points related to this and would be open to questions.
Thank you. Board, as you know, Richard already gave us a briefing on this earlier, as did Chantel, mentioned it in her comments. We know there was a resolution that was not actually passed, but they wanted us to keep in mind some of their concerns. And at this point, we don't make any decisions on procedures. We only make a decision on policy. And this is a first reading, so we will bring this back next month. But do you have any questions for Dr. Burns? Trustee Howard.
I appreciate the background that you gave us, because you look at this and you say, how often is it used and how much is it needed? I got a little bit better appreciation, I think, as a result of your discussion. But when I read it, I do see some what I think are significant changes in the policy. And I'm going to mention them, and maybe you can help me understand. And obviously, when we do these policies, there's good intent, but there's also, once the policy is established, people look at it as a reason for doing what they want to do. And so we need to be cautious about the policy so we don't give people reasons to do what we don't want them to do. And when I see the strikeout portion, the basis upon which this dismissal could take place is if a student has failed to live up to course requirements to the extent that it negatively impacts the learning environment of other students. That's the basis upon which this policy presently exists. The change to it is that the instructor may initiate withdrawal of a student whose failure to meet course requirements or other actions, which is a very, very, very broad category, and that interfere with the learning of others. And my difficulty is that broad category or of other actions is so broad and so open-ended, I don't know, quite frankly, what it means. And it troubles me that may be a source of controversy. What does that mean in terms of a basis for this kind of withdrawal? The other substantive change, or I think substantive change that's taken place is, it says in the old policy, to withdraw a student, the instructor must follow established procedures, including informing the student in advance and providing documentation to the registrar's office. The new policy says that if the student fails to respond after documented attempts to address the instructor's concerns, and again, instructor's concerns are a very broad category that don't necessarily relate to the prior or the existing category of fail to live up to course requirements to the extent that it negatively impacts the learning of others. Then the instructor must inform the students of the withdrawal and then provide documentation. And then there's an appeal process after that. So what happens to the student when all this is happening? I don't see a procedure that's protecting the student's ongoing educational interests. And it seems to be creating some very open-ended bases for using this withdrawal. Now, understanding that the reason for the request is it's going to be used benevolently, as you have indicated. Students and instructors get together and try and use this in a way to address some student needs or something. My fear is that it's too open-ended, it's too broad, and it has a potential for misuse. And it changes the basis for the withdrawal from a single basis of the student failed to live up to the course requirements to the extent that it negatively impacts the learning environment of students. Can you address my concerns and tell me why I shouldn't be concerned?
I'm not sure I can, but I certainly will attempt to. When we revised this policy, we actually felt like putting in other actions that interfere would actually narrow the scope of authority of the faculty rather than broadening it as you have suggested, or that I'm hearing you're suggesting. And I would say there are many more circumstances where a student's failure to meet course requirements would lead to withdraw from a course rather than other actions. And it really is those other actions, and maybe they're one and the same, because as I was describing to you, the lack of participation in the classroom setting certainly would be the same thing, essentially, as failure to meet the course requirements. So maybe there is even some redundancy in that particular sentence. I'm sorry, but that's the best I can offer. Again, as we revised this policy, we were revising it with the intent to try to narrow that, not to broaden it. So certainly there are some different perspectives on the language we've used, and I would be happy to take this back and take another look at it. It would mean probably pulling it from moving forward, but if it's that, if it's a significant concern of yours, Trustee Howard, we certainly could take another look at it.
Well, we can see the flavor of the board, I guess. Mr. Nielsen?
So some point of clarification on this, where, and I agree with what Ken says, is that when you look at the intent of the policy that was written and what is rewritten, when you see that word "other actions that interfere with learning," holy smokes, that can be lots of stuff. So I say, what if a student challenges the instructor's position on their political position and does it vocally because they feel empowered to challenge what's being taught, and they encourage kids to do that? Or maybe that an instructor has a different belief and faith or whatever, and so the student defends their position, and the teacher takes exception and said, "You're distracting my class. I have a position, and I don't need you challenging me," which there, so is that a situation under this policy where that the teacher could make a case for that you're interfering with my instruction in the classroom, so I want to remove you?
Chairwoman Wood and Trustee Nielsen, I would stand here and say absolutely not. That is not a reason for withdrawing a student from a classroom. And if for some reason that did occur, the appeal process that we have, and you don't have the procedure before you, but it is as Richard described earlier, it starts with notifications to the student. The conversation is going to occur between the faculty member and the student before it ever gets to the point where the faculty is considering a withdrawal. That is normal process in classrooms and relationships between faculty and students. However, when those conversations do not result in change in student behavior and the faculty would make a decision to move towards that withdrawal, they must notify the student a minimum of 48 hours. That's as the procedure is written now. We're still going to talk about the procedure a little bit more in the future. But so the student would be notified 48 hours prior to the faculty submitting the paperwork to the registrar's office requesting the withdrawal of the student. The student then has the opportunity to go back to the faculty member and discuss with them their objection to the withdrawal, if they're objecting to the withdrawal. After that discussion occurs, if the faculty member decides to go forward with the withdrawal and it is actually submitted and the W appears on the transcript, the student then has an opportunity after that, and I believe the procedure says 5 days after that, to move forward with the appeal process. And it would begin with the division chair, and it would move up the ranks then after that. Only when the student's not receiving the answer that they would wish to receive from the appeal process, they would continue to move up the ranks to get that decision changed. And I would say that it would be, if for some reason the faculty member did withdraw a student inappropriately, we would have the opportunity to correct that because the situation would be reviewed by other people, and certainly the consideration of the student would be taken into account in making that decision, and also the experience of that the faculty member would describe. There would also be opportunity in that investigation, if you will, that's rather a strong word, but at least looking into what the situation, there would be the opportunity to, if there was the situation that there was concern about the learning environment, there certainly would be the opportunity to talk to other students about what the impact was to that learning environment. So all of that would be taken into account in the decision making in terms of supporting the appeal or rejecting the appeal.
Trustees, this is first reading, but I think we need to give some, obviously we're concerned about some of the language. I think we need to be very specific. I would just like to add that, first of all, for me, a policy is very necessary. We need to have a policy on this topic. And Richard, I've been a student not that long ago, and some of my perspective is, as a student, I know as a student, there will be a syllabus, there will be course requirements. I will either meet those demands or I will not. I know what I'm trying to say is I know the expectations going into it, and some of those expectations are, yes, I will be engaged in the classroom. Yes, I will make sure I'm in the seat at such and such time. I will, basically, whatever the instructor has laid out for me. So I do think it's important that we have policy that faculty can come back to deal with this issue. I guess some of the wordsmithing that's going on here is concerned about how broad this would be. So Board, would you like to ask Dr. Burns to go back and, do you have something specific you would like to ask her to do to go back and reword? Mr. Howard?
Yeah, I don't have any specific language that I'm going to suggest because I really think conceptually, I think this needs to be thought out differently. And from my perspective anyway, this policy puts the student in a defensive position right from the beginning. As soon as the instructor says, I've told you about this and their documented attempts about my concerns, and then he or she informs the student of the withdrawal, informs them of the withdrawal, and then provides document to the registrar's office, and then there may be an appeal. And why isn't the process one where the instructor finds objectionable basis or a basis for the withdrawal, and then initiates a process and engages a third party to make a decision as to whether or not the withdrawal should go through, rather than just leaving it up to the instructor with the student suffering the consequences and having to initiate an appeal. I would prefer to see, I mean, this is a very, maybe somebody's paying tuition and coming to school and really doesn't care about being here, and maybe they ought to leave, but I'm going to start from the premise that when they pay their tuition and they come here, there's some reason they want to be here. And to deny them that opportunity is, I think, a very strong move. And so I'd like to see a process that gives them due process in deciding whether or not there's a basis for the instructor's concerns, rather than waiting till the end to have an appeal. So conceptually, that's the way I'm kind of looking at this.
Trustee Howard, though, have you kind of joined, when we're looking at policy, and it sounds like procedure does specifically we don't have the procedure in front of us, but you've spoken to it. Sounds like procedure addresses your concerns, the due process.
Well, my concern is that this language endorses a procedure that I would not accept.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, when I read this, if I just take out a student that fails to meet course requirements, I mean, that's a pretty easy one if they're not doing it. But if you take that word out, or, and now you just make it the one, an instructor may initiate withdrawal of a student who interferes with learning of others in the class. And I'm with Ken, that's too broad of a statement, and that can be a lot for interpretation, and it puts the instructor in a position where he initiates an action that requires the student to be removed there. I'm with Ken. I think that's got to be tightened up to have an explanation of that.
I think I have a different worldview. I guess we all do. I lean more toward a faculty member ought to be able to run their classroom. And there are expectations, and certainly when you move on to even higher education than community college, you are going to run into expectations that you will meet the academic performance and the syllabus of the classroom. So we do need to have something. Whether we're all going to agree on the language, probably not, but it looks like the general tenor of the board is we'd like to have this reworked.
Trustee,
Any other comments, board?
may I respond?
Yes, certainly.
I would just appreciate being able to respond to Trustee Howard and his remarks. And I agree with the statement that you just provided, Chairwoman Wood. We hire faculty based on their knowledge, their experience, and their ability to conduct and manage the classroom environment. We trust that they have those abilities to, one, put together a structure for a classroom that is provided through the syllabus, that outlines the requirements, that outlines the expectations of students. And then secondly, we also entrust those faculty to be good judges in terms of evaluating how the students have met the requirements that have been established based on the syllabus. Is that a 100% foolproof process and system? No, because we are dealing with humans, both human students and human faculty members. And so yes, we will have faculty members who err in judgment, and we will have students who err in judgment. And that is why we provide an appeal process for the occasions where those errors might occur. The procedure allows for an appeals process for, as you have spoken to, others to come in and weigh in on whether the right decision was made, or whether anybody was treated unfairly, or whether due process was used even in the classroom setting. But to take away the individual faculty members' ability to manage that classroom environment would really be destructive to higher educational learning process from my perspective.
Trustee Howard.
I can appreciate that perspective, but I don't think we're suggesting here anything akin to taking away from instructors the ability to manage their classrooms. This is an extreme action. It's not something, as you indicated, not used very often at all. And so, since it is such an extreme action, that's why I think the protections need to be provided, and some basis for the student having, and the instructor, quite frankly, having some due process of a third entity, a third person making a decision about whether this withdrawal should take place. And that's what troubles me. As you so eloquently said, we hire good people around here, but if they were all good people that always did good things, students and instructors alike, we wouldn't need any rules. And these rules are there in order to provide guidance for when we're unsure about things. And that's why I'm concerned that this policy, as it's set up, in those extreme situations where there's a withdrawal, needs to be, make sure that the student gets a fair shake on some kind of due process.
Would it be helpful, Trustee Howard, when we look at this in the future, if we had the procedures in front of us as well, so you could see the due process in place?
It would be helpful, yes. But as you've already pointed out, we don't make procedure, we make policy. And they can change the procedure. We need to make sure the policy that we set up adequately establishes the guidelines that we want the procedure to follow. So, yes, I'd like to see what the procedure is, but we could set this policy and the procedure could change 2 years from now.
So if we built into the policy some reference to the due process?
Yeah, well, there is already, I think, a reference to due process in that there's an appeal. But the timeliness of it and who's making the early on decisions that are affecting the student, I don't think adequately give the student protection.
It's a sequencing issue. The appeal's at the very end after all these other actions have already occurred. And you're thinking that appeal process, or his ability to engage the student, I mean, should be earlier in the process before he's already been withdrawn and then has to appeal it from the backside.
I wouldn't call it an appeal. I would call it due process in the withdrawal, yes.
Trustee Nielsen.
And what I see here, Lita, is that the original policy that was written in 2003, first paragraph talks about academic non-performance. Paragraph 2 talks about academic dismissal. And it talks about this as you go through and then the process. Everything in this is fine, except for, I agree with Ken, is when you put the word other actions that interfere, that's such a broad statement that if there is other actions that you're protecting the instructor from, maybe that needs to be a separate policy. But if you talk about an academic non-performance process, then the student knows that going in, there is a due process associated with it, and there's a repeal process. That's one. When you get into something that says, or any other action that the instructor deems interfering in the learning process of the class, that's such a broad statement that if you can tighten that up, it might have to be a separate policy. But to marry these two together and leave that question, which is, what does that mean? I think that we need to clean that up.
So, yes.
And one final comment that I don't think I addressed to Trustee Howard. The procedure allows for the student to continue in the classroom through the appeal process. If they are appealing, they're not subject to have to leave the classroom setting. So they would continue to be a part of that classroom until the final decision on the appeal would be made. And if the appeal was upheld for the student, then obviously there would be a reversal of that W and the student would earn the grade that they would likely earn in the classroom. So
and how fractured is the relationship, though, between the instructor and the student at that point? Would the students be able to get a fair shake in that class? I mean, you've already gone down the pike quite a ways at that point.
I think that would be the same with a discipline issue. I mean, it is what it is. We have to give faculty the ability to manage their classrooms. And so we haven't given Dr. Burns some very specific language yet. We've said, go back and rework this, so we're not being very helpful. The only specific thing was the other actions. So if you would take a look at that and maybe rework this. And I did want to comment, Chantel, you noticed that the student reps didn't even attend the last 2 meetings. Richard, please tell me what that's about, if you would.
Of course, I would love to. So as you can tell, the resolutions that we passed that I discussed with you talked about students and their responsibilities. And basically what that was is we did have, as working with students, it's difficult at times. And retaining those students could be difficult at times. From my understanding, and I don't want to go tit for tat by any means, and not a personal attack, but I believe in January there was no attendance whatsoever. And then in the next board meeting, I don't know if we did or we did not have attendance, but those individuals are no longer a part of ASNIC currently. And so that's why we didn't have representation at one of the board meetings. Now the first one I'm unsure of. I don't know if they just forgot. I'm not 100% positive of that. But the representation, it's a difficult. There's only 10 of us, and there's about 50 different groups and committees that we could be a part of. So we're kind of spread thin, but we do the best that we can, and we'll continue to try to do the best that we can. But yes, that was a failure on our part, and I will take 100% responsibility for that.
Well, if you would just go back to the student representatives and mention that this board and the faculty have been very open to shared governance input, but you can't have any input if they don't come to the meetings. And so the faculty representatives come forward with what they have. And so if you want to have some input, they need to attend. Does that seem fair?
110%.
Okay. Thank you. Board, it looks like we're moving on. Dr. Burns, thank you. Board, I asked for this item to be put on the agenda just to discuss our trustee travel real quick. Our professional development, opportunities have come up for discussion again. As we've said in the past, as an institution, as an education institution, we want to support professional development. Hopefully we're doing that at every level possible. Of course, we do have budget restrictions. So I checked with Dr. Dunlap on the possibility of the professional development, the continuing development of the board, which I think is important, and how it relates to our budget. And he has assured me that with this conference coming on the west side of the region, that it is affordable for trustees to attend. It has been budgeted for. I don't know if any of you are interested in the conference, but as we move forward, we'll need to get in touch with the president's office and make sure they're aware. It's not till this fall, correct? October. But to get a registration in an appropriate time and make sure that we don't pay extra fees and we don't overtax the president's office, we need to really, if you're interested, get a hold of me and I'll get all the numbers back to the office, okay? And you've been given all that information from ACCT, and you should have it in your email, you should have it by mail, and know when the conference is. Okay, so that's under any more comments or questions under trustee travel? No.
Only that note that last year, none of us went to the conference, so we have skipped a year, so it would make maybe sense this year, kind of in every other year, and it is here on the West Coast. Last year it was not, so it is less expensive and easier to attend. Does that make sense?
I agree. If we have an opportunity to do that, I think we should. All right, that takes us on to information items. Our Career Technical Education Facility, Chris Martin.
Madam Chair, trustees, very brief report tonight on the CTE facility. We are finalizing design development. We're working really, really closely with the engineering team to fine tune our electrical, HVAC, and plumbing needs, really looking for cost effectiveness and squeezing where we can squeeze here. We've toured several facilities around Coeur d'Alene that were constructed using engineered metal structures. We've directed the architect to proceed in that fashion for everything on the south end of the building, all the labs, to be an engineered metal structure, which has created some cost savings for us. I'm happy to report the City of Rathdrum and NIC have executed an amendment to our annexation agreement that allows us to postpone some of the additional site development and construction of roads and utilities. So that's finalized. That gives us some space there. We've renegotiated the architectural engineering fee for a reduction of $325,000. We've updated the site plan as a cost consideration. The entire site has moved 30 feet closer to KTEC, which allowed us some more opportunity just to show our partnership there. But in this case, it allowed us to reduce the need for a lift station, which was a costly site development issue.
Very good.
Any questions on the CTE
Well,
facility?
Mr. Nielsen and Ms. Meyer, you might want to chime in, but.
Yeah, just a quick question, Chris, is that when you talk about the south side, the three sides, that means that there's been a decision what the north side's going to be as far as structure. Have you identified that? And then what that additional cost is for the north side versus if it was a steel structure side?
We've not finalized what that will be, but at this point, we determined that it wouldn't make sense for it to be pre-engineered metal with the two-story structure. So everything past that has been determined that pre-engineered metal is the right way to go. We're still looking at our structural opportunities for that front side, so that has not been finalized.
Mr. Banducci.
And Chris, I don't know if this is really more for you or for Rael. Got her attention. I had the opportunity to have the visit with the consultant, and I believe that Ron has met with him also. I don't know if any of the other trustees have had that opportunity yet. I know some of the local business folks that he's reached out to. I know a couple have called me. Where are we at in that process, and how long do we expect him to be meeting with folks and trying to kind of evaluate the circumstances before he makes his recommendation of what sort of raise he thinks is feasible? Kind of wondering where we're at with that.
Yeah.
Trustee Howard.
Maybe I can answer that question because that's not a function of this board. That's a function of the foundation.
No, it is. I was just curious, that's part of the CTE, because we're still trying to find $5.1 million to go with the 15 we've allocated. Because unless somebody's changed this, and we're talking about how we're doing this, right now the budget's at 20.1 million, am I correct?
It's at 20, and it's
with the
going down every day.
With the architectural money we just saved?
That, and along with some engineering decisions that have been made, the total budget is less than $20 million.
Okay, that's new news. See, I know that just got a piece of information out that we didn't have.
I think that's fair, Mr. Banducci. That was going to be one of my questions. Where we're at in the budget, trustees, liaisons, and square footage.
Square footage is at right at 110,000, excuse me, right at 100,000 square feet. So that's been continually reducing. We're still massaging a couple of pieces there, trying to continue to push that down.
Thank you. Mr. Howard, you have your hand up.
I'm gonna say what I've been saying, because people ask me about this all the time, so correct me if I am not saying this right, which is this board approved a $15 million CTE campus, all in, all done, out there, and we're going forward with that portion, and we were trying to look at future growth. So the college went out, working with the Department of Labor and some national statistics, came up with an understanding of what they perceive and industry input, what the growth is going to be for the next 5 to 10 years. Part of this additional amount of money is for growth. The other portion of this is made up of equipment that is needed to fill the extra square footage and replacement of some of the equipment that it doesn't make any sense to move that's in place in the ground, and some additional requirements for some other things like an extra engine dyno and things like that. So this addition, the $15 million that was approved by the board, is basically almost the exact structure that we have. Now we're adding some additional square feet and the equipment, which is the $5 million. And my understanding is that the foundation has taken on the responsibility to raise that money through either grant and in conjunction with our president, and fundraising to make that. So again, there is no additional cost to the taxpayer. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement. And I want, if I can just make one comment.
Let him finish with me, so I would get
Just to
clarified.
make, the foundation is in the middle of a feasibility study, and they are committed to looking at this, and they have made a statement that they will conduct a feasibility study to assess our level of interest, responding to the college's request to raise $5 million. So we are almost complete with the feasibility study. But you are correct, to be a mix of both gifts as well as grants.
Trustee Howard?
Well, I just want to make the comment that and I think Chris just made it, that the foundation is not committed to raise anything yet. All they have committed to do is to study it and then decide whether or not they will engage in a capital program, and if so, to what extent. And they know that we would like $5 million. That's the target that we've given them. But they haven't made that decision yet. And so I don't want us to start from the premise that they have made that commitment and that decision. That hasn't been made yet.
That's all I was asking, was the timeline, because I knew they're investigating it, and they're interviewing and they're researching it, so.
And that's a great opportunity for us to thank our foundation for even undertaking this sort of a study and hiring a consultant to do the feasibility. We need to know, they need to know, is this something the community can support? We sure hope it is. The foundation has done so many wonderful things for North Idaho College, and we hope this is another thing that they can add to their credit. It seems like, Judy and Ron, you have done your homework, that this $5 million is something that would be necessary, and so that's why we're asking the foundation to study. Is that correct? Is that
No question in a perfect world that if he says that, that we need to prepare for 5 to 10 years down the road, we need additional square footage. There's no question that with the additional square footage, additional equipment's going to be required. And so with expansion of square footage and upgrading some equipment and doing what would be responsible, that's the other $5 million. But that, and we've made it perfectly clear in our meetings, is that we are not going to at any point, any time, go to the taxpayers for this $5 million. So if we can't raise the $5 million, we'll take square footage and we'll take equipment out of here.
So I would like to comment on that real quick. Judy and you have been the liaisons, and you have been representing the board, and I think you're doing a fine job. I would like to clarify, though, I believe the board said if the president and administration came back to us and showed us that we need to talk to you about additional funding, additional square footing, we would be open to that discussion. And we might say, no, 15 million, 100,000 square feet, but I don't want to shut the door to discussion. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Dunlap.
Madam Chair, also, I want to be clear that that $5 million we're talking about ensures that all the programs we initially talked about can be moved out there. Without that, the automotive program won't be able to move out there. So this provides the capacity and the equipment for that program as well.
So those are some of the discussions it seems that we should be having, our liaisons should be having with administration. Trustee Meyer?
And just to supplement it, part of that discussion is it may have to be in phases because we'll have to see how the funding goes. It doesn't mean it goes away, it just means we may have to adapt based on the forces that come about and the funding that's available.
This, Madam Chair,
Trustee Nielsen.
this process has been an education for everybody. In the first 2 or 3 meetings we had, the size of this facility grew, the money grew, and we've just kept staying on task to say this is our commitment to the college, this is our commitment to our students, this is our commitment to our taxpayers, and I could safe to speak for Chris that we've taken $5 million out of the original one that was the must-have that the architect had the freedom to do. So we're staying in this, and I think that for us to give ground right now are doing more, I think it would be, we need to continue to hold the course of where we are, which is 15 million, and we will go find the other money to do that. So when it's all said and done, we have this beautiful facility at what was budgeted on the first pass, so.
Thank you. If Thank you, Chris, for your
Thank you.
presentation. We're almost here, board, we're almost done, because we're at my report, and it's brief. I have my notes. I've lost my notes. It'll be even briefer.
Madam Chair, while you're looking at your
Yes.
notes, wanted to ask the board and our administration about the fact that Senator Crapo is coming to town next week.
Saw your email, yes.
And are we part of, the administration, where are we with helping
Did everybody
stay
see that?
connected?
Dr. Dunlap and Mark, can you enlighten us?
Madam Chair, members of the board, yes, Senior Senator Crapo will be in town. It is a function of the Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce to bring him to town. He'll be speaking to the membership, of which you all are very welcome to attend. I'm unable to attend. I have a prior commitment that will take me away, but I think it would be valuable should you like to. I'm sure Shannon or Mindy could help coordinate tickets for you.
Apparently it has to be done by tomorrow.
Yeah, because it's
But I
Monday
think
the
our
30th.
president's out of town also. So
It's a
do we have
chamber
anybody
luncheon?
officially from the
It's a
college there?
chamber luncheon, yes.
Would we just get a table, maybe?
Madam Chair, at this point, I would just recommend individual tickets. I think that'd be the prudent way to go.
Okay. Board, if you individually want to attend that, let's get with Shannon right away. Okay? All right, my report's very brief. I just want to mention that I've had an opportunity to drive the Dyke Road. I think that it is looking very nice with the trails and what they're doing to the dike on the sides, and beautiful vistas and views. And I think that the city and the college have done their best to work together for our citizens and make lemonade out of lemons. And so I just think it's looking very nice. I also would like to remind all of you, and some of you have your tickets for the Human Rights Banquet, which is on April 13th. And if you should have your tickets in front of you if you're attending. Hope you all can attend. And then finally, we're going into spring break, right? Next week. I know that the people I talk to are looking forward to that, mostly students, and probably faculty too. So I wish you all a wonderful spring break and a nice rest, and we'll all come back here and do this all over again. Any remarks for the good of the order? Trustee Banducci.
I am delighted to see the spring enrollment report for 2015 in front of me. And I see that finely dressed vice president named Graydon Stanley is at the ready to talk to me about this. I don't know if this is for the good of the order, but I'm gonna go there for just a minute. Graydon, tell me the numbers. I've got the spring 14, the fall 14, and the spring 15, and I'm looking at the numbers, and I look at what we had in the outreach centers, and actually, I thought it was interesting, we had a little bump up in Bonners, but we're down in Kellogg significantly way more than the 10%, down at Sandpoint way more than the 10%. Our online is way down more than the 10%. And as I look at the head counts, at the total, we're 5.92 and 9.58, which then falls right back on where we were last year. Let's grab my numbers here, which was the 7.13 and the 11.51. So when we make those numbers, I keep saying we're on our trajectory, but the two of those together for FTE is 21 and change percent over 2 years. Sorry, my math is starting to go, and over 13% on head count. Talk to me real quick on this, because I'm just looking at this as academic, PTE, dual credit. Dual credit, we did have a rise in head count, but otherwise, everything else looks ugly. Where we going?
If I may, Mr. Banducci, I know you're anxious to hear about this, but is this meant to be on the agenda?
My office going to be next month in Sandpoint, or the following month back here. Tell me, because it's something we should, I want to
Sure.
know where we're trending and what the numbers are telling us.
But if you're
Chris.
going to cover it in detail next month, then maybe you could get with trustee Banducci.
Detail means over 2 minutes, Stan.
Madam Chair, I'd be really glad to, if that can be on the agenda for next month, I'd be glad to discuss it in greater detail. Plus, I'd be glad to talk to trustee Banducci and address some of those questions too
Will that
in
work,
the interest of
trustee
the
Ban-
evening.
Oh, yeah, I'm fine, but actually, I just think people are going to want to know. We talk about our budget projections. The teachers made a resolution that says, hey, we don't want to have our pay be based on, how many people are signing up to come to school. We want to be part of the budget process in a different way, but unfortunately, attendance kind of drives the bus and tells us how much money we have. We've got, we said 6,000 and change, and we're going to get 37 and then 87 to support a rec center. Are the numbers there, and where are we going with this?
Normally, this would be an agenda item that we could dig deep, and so that would be my recommendation. Put it on next month's agenda.
A lot of things are
All right.
contingent on this.
Okay, any more remarks? Yes, Mr. Stanley.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I just want to real quickly acknowledge North Idaho College's participation in the reverse job fair today that was held out in Post Falls. And just note to you that there were a huge number of our staff that were involved in that yesterday and today, and we were proud to be a part of that. And then also note at the end that the foundation sponsors scholarships that recognizes so many of those outstanding students out there. Dr. Burns was available to present 2 $1,000 scholarships to 2 of the top students, but NIC was intimately and broadly involved in that event the last couple of days. An important part of our partnership with Kootenai County and Post Falls.
Great job, guys.
Thank you. Board, I'll entertain a motion to go into exec.
Yeah, I was going to say, Ron's all excited. We got to go into executive session.
Motion to adjourn? Oh,
Unless-
motion to come out of regular session then would,
We'll just a motion to go into exec.
I move that we go into executive session for the purpose of
Personnel.
personnel. Whatever the section is in
67,
May.
23, 45B.
That's the one I wanted.
Do I have a second?
second.
All right, we'll go into exec. All in favor? Thank you, Mr. Howard.
Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Roll call.
Roll call.
Roll call. Trustee Nielsen.
Aye, yes.
Trustee Meyer.
Yes.
Trustee Howard.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Trustee Banducci. We can either stay here, board, or we can find a smaller room.